Cain was the first to roar. For humanity and the Emperor, Jel answered in kind. Angron watched his scions, reached out, and laid his hand on Jel's head, feeling the younger warrior's concern ripple through him. No need to worry, Angron said. I will bring you victory. No need to worry, my children. I will fight alongside you. The butcher's nails in his skull chewed through Angron's worst memories, taking the edge off the pain and letting him meet his scions as one of them. He smiled then, and in that instant the 12th Legion Primarch and his warriors bonded, the sort of unity the World Eaters had once wished for in other timelines. Far away, in the ghoul stars, where dead suns cast a cold light across countless worlds, the Night Lord's fleet cut through the dark. Nostromo, the ruined, fear-racked homeworld of Conrad Kersey, rose under the watchful eyes of its sons. When the 13th Fleet pulled out of warp above Mandeville Point, Kers sent his message out with a hint of pride. My brother, we have arrived at my world. It's a perfect world, Conrad said, as if the adjective fit. A world that relies on fear and death. Angron, you should come down and see it. The ship's system AI tried to slip tendrils into the Night Lord's systems but probed cautiously. It had learned from the Emperor's dream and approached the Night Lord's tucked databases like a hand into a hornet's nest. The files it found were saturated with cruelty and terror, almost as if the system were probing living minds. Your brother is far madder than I imagined, the AI recorded. Angron read the transmission and, despite himself, asked, if possible, I would like to visit Nostromo. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Redeemer Guard flanked him. Jel and the others donned Terminator armor and kept Angron tightly screened. Everyone expected trouble. It wasn't distrust of their Primarch, but of the notoriously erratic Night Lords. As the blue and white Stormbird descended, Angron sat and listened. Tell the pilot to slow down, System AI said. I'm breaching the planet's systems. Angron nearly leapt out of his seat. Slow down. Do you know what you're doing? If Conrad Kurza finds out, I don't want to fight him on his own turf. Angron said it softly, but the warhounds heard. Get the warhounds ready. Cain barked the order. Gel, furious at the implication of being caught unready, punched Cain's chest plate hard. Cain! Gel glared. Relay my order. Get the warhounds ready. Cain, you can't shirk such responsibility. Gel didn't know exactly what Angron planned, only that conflict felt inevitable. On Nostromo, Kers and his sons had been waiting on the landing pad. They resented the Stormbird loitering in the air above them. Sevatar's pale face flicked with impatience. Should we urge them? No, Conrad said. Though offended, he stopped his scions from acting rudely in return. When the Stormbird finally touched down, the hatch opened. Redeemer Guard were the first down, stepping onto the tarmac with deliberate, resolute gait. They scanned the Night Lords and the mortal crowds around them. Jel and Cain calculated angles and exits. Extraction would be difficult in this throng. Angron intended a few barbed pleasantries, but the air itself hit him first. The scent of Nostromo was a pressure, an immense weight of fear and cruelty pressing into his skull. He staggered back 2 paces, winded. Nail, he spat. System AI watched the emotions wash over Angron and felt something like pity. Nostromo was a place of absolute order that hid oppression and despair. The people's fear was a shroud. Beneath the semblance of righteousness were twisted corrupted souls. Angron could not fathom how Conrad had been formed by such a world. Brother, are you all right? Conrad asked, stepping forward. Conrad's concern registered, and for a moment Angron saw the other Primarch as something fragile and alone in a dark place. The move to step forward, however, triggered the Redeemer Guard to raise weapons. Sevatar and the Night Lords mirrored them, hands going to blades. Tension tightened like a drawn bow. Apologize, Angron barked, cutting the instant to violence. Jel strode forward and bowed his head. I apologize, Lord Kers. Forgive our rudeness. Barbarous of us. A man who knows when to yield knows how to live. Conrad accepted the apology, but Angron surged on. He closed the distance and fixed his gaze on Kers. What have you done to your people? Angron's voice was raw. He seized Conrad's shoulders. Kers's complexion paled. This is justice. I had no choice, Conrad muttered, frantic. This is for justice. My father believed it was right. You should understand. You must understand. This was unavoidable. Sevatar and the others read the signs and rushed in. The Redeemer Guard saw their move and met them. Imperial superhumans collided with the Night Lords, steel and fury exchanging shapes in the dust. Sevatar took a heavy fist from Gel and spat blood. The two began to trade blows, old rivalries and raw strength, finding a brutal language. System AI recorded the encounter through Angron's eyes and tried to make sense of it. The mortals who had cheered now watched in stunned silence as their Primarchs slugged at one another. Then there was a crisp slap. Angron had struck Conrad across the face. The bright, bloody handprint rocked Khorne out of his frantic litany. He covered his cheek, bewildered. "You hit me?" Angron's face was unreadable for a heartbeat. "Sorry," he said lowly. The apology seemed to bruise him as much as the act had bruised Khorne. The flood of Nostromo's misery had made Angron's insides turn. He could see Khorne as the only light in a world of vice, and he feared the darkness would consume him. The butcher's nails muttered something that sounded like amusement. "Good hit," they hissed in his head. Another slap. The compulsion was an ugly thing to fight. Angron's hand rose of its own will and landed again, firmer this time. Conrad shrieked. Sevatar, beside himself with fury at the insult to his Primarch, exploded into action. With a brutal heave, he turned on Gel and sent him skidding. He pummeled Redeemer guards with a blind, savage strength. For a moment, he seemed unstoppable, until a heavy quarterstaff connected with his temple. Sevatar's eyes rolled back. He crumpled. Varys stood over him, staff in hand and face like carved stone. Though the strike had the pretense of stealth, Varys was a librarian by training and means, an apparently defenseless thing that cut deep when it had to. Around them, the mortal scribes recorded the absurdity. The first real clash between Night Lords and Warhounds, a spectacle as terrifying as it was comical. The two Primarchs stood in the midst of it, Angron furious and overburdened, Khorne shocked and muttering about justice, while their sons tore at each other in the dust. System AI kept taking notes, trying to capture data from a meeting that had spiraled into the very chaos both fleets had feared. The whole incident ended with Angron pinning Conrad Khorne to the ground. The moment Angron extended his psychic reach beyond his own body, he felt it. A cold stare lodged in the heart of Conrad Khorne. It was Conrad, and yet it wasn't. The sinister gaze pierced straight into Angron like a viper in the dark, coiling tight when he was most unguarded. After the shock, Angron leaned on the raw power of his mind to steady the darkness within Khorne. Even so, data impact. The system AI registered the assault on Angron's mind. Cursing Conrad Khorne inwardly, the damned lunatic, it freed processing power and converted the attacking impressions into packets for storage. Angron, breathless, muttered, "Nail, what were those?" "What?" The AI did not understand at once. "I saw what Conrad saw," Angron said, eyes wet with grief. The visions had been fragments, grotesque and brief. Rogaldorn standing with a severed arm, noble imperial sons warped into hideous things, degradation and slaughter. At the end was himself, ugly, maddened, raging, and incomprehensible. "Conrad Khorne," Angron snorted softly. "Have you been tormented by these things all this time?" Conrad's face was swollen and hollowed. He blinked and stared at Angron in disbelief. "You saw it, my brother?" "Yes." Angron rose slowly and extended a hand. "Brother!" "For Conrad Khorne!" Conrad snarled and reached it, but one of his scions kicked toward Angron's chest, both feet together, flying. The scion's face was familiar. Shen, one of Nostromo's few proud warriors. He landed the blow, and Angron simply grabbed the bat's leg and tossed him aside as if he were nothing. Angron looked over the chaotic tableau, Night Lords and Warhounds locked in a bitter brawl, and said, "Enough." He bore the pain the images had left behind, and it ebbed. "Thanks, Nail." "You are welcome, Unit 2. Conrad seized Angron's hand. "Your planet needs liberation, my brother. Do you require help?" "Perhaps a little." Conrad fell silent for a long moment. When his hoarse voice came again, it was lighter, almost conspiratorial. "Very well, my scions. Your quarrels with your cousins end now." Angron shouted to the Redeemer Guard. At his command, Varys withdrew his metal scepter from Sever's swollen face. "You'll wait." Sevatar opened his eyes and glared. "Sorry, brother. If you're not satisfied, I'll see you in the octagonal cage." Varys reached out and took Sevatar's hand. He did not care for the grudge. Sevatar gripped him back. "Sevatar, your name?" "Varys." "Name a time, Varys." "Any time, my brother." They followed behind Conrad and Angron, Night Lords and Warhounds side by side, their voices low. The hatred that had flared only moments before had been papered over by the Primarchs' presence. Every step deeper into Nostromo felt like a descent into an abyss. Gothic spires and grotesque architecture loomed in the dark like warning teeth, telling outsiders to stay away. Angron felt only oppression, an entire planet bent under it. "Do you rule your people through fear?" he asked. Conrad's body trembled at the question, a small movement that put the demigod's scions on edge. Sevatar watched Varys closely in the rear, ready to pounce at the slightest change. "I use order," Conrad said, his voice thin and tired. When he turned that pale gaze toward Angron, it felt like a vampire aiming at his throat. "Fear is not order, my brother. The people here are very dark." Angron's voice slowed, steady as the world seemed to pause with him. These humans had been compressed by pressure and terror until evil was buried deep inside them as a survival. Even villains feared death. It felt absurd. "How much do you know about your planet?" Angron pressed. "Everything?" Conrad's mouth twitched. When he saw the intensity in Angron's eyes, he drew his neck back like a frightened animal. "Everything, my brother! You tell me everything! Ha! How long has it been since you returned?" Angron's jaw clenched and his veins stood black on his temple. The butcher's nails flashed their green light like breathing lanterns. "I need to show you something, brother." He closed his eyes. Fear prickled him. Fear that after he left Nuceria, the old masters and vermin would reassert themselves. When the system AI's data reached him, Angron wanted to butcher every noble on the planet. Conrad was puzzled. He had never shown his brother what he had to see. "Just you and me, brother. Since you have that ability, see what I am about to show you. My brother." Angron watched Conrad, understanding him better than anyone, and yet refusing to bow to a specter of fate. He would control his own destiny, even if the nails controlled half of it. He grabbed Conrad's hand, and amid the curious stares of their followers, they hurried into a small room. "Jell, I need machinery, a computer or a playback device," Angron barked. "My lord, I'll have them brought down at once," someone replied. "Sevatar, fetch one." Conrad didn't know what Angron intended, but he sent Sevatar to fetch devices. Inside, Angron sat on a luxurious chair and gripped his skull. "Tell me, Nail, this isn't real." "In fact, it is true. Nostromo is beyond saving. Slaughter and murder have been woven into its culture, as with Nuceria." "No, worse than Nuceria." Those words struck Angron like a hammer. He gasped. "Will we fail? Their triumph stolen? Their plans undone?" "Angron, no, that will not happen. A beautiful future drives human progress. Inevitably, those in power will use power after succession, which is why we need overseers." "Minor issues, Angron. We have time to resolve Nuceria. Priority Nostromo." "Oh, how interesting." "Unit 2, guess what I found?" "Xenos. Rather interesting." Angron knew what the nails could do, how they fed his fury. At the word Xenos, his hands smashed the table. "Tell me, Conrad Kurze, what do you see right now?" Conrad's pale lips parted. "Gel, Khorne, and that one called Sevatar." Angron asked sharply. "Can Sevatar be trusted, Nail?" "He can." "Get my brother cleaned up," Angron barked, voice filled with explosive need to remove the grime and the grotesque trappings that had become Kurze's armor. He softened his tone as the Space Marines gathered. "Do you trust me, Conrad Kurze?" Conrad hesitated for a heartbeat, then thought of the only demigod who had believed in him. "I trust you." He said it with solemnity. They stripped away the miscellaneous trophies and accoutrements that Kurze had worn for years, a decision that rankled the Night Lords, who whispered their resentment. Angron, newly returned, had no right to act like the Emperor, they muttered, but he acted anyway. When the devices arrived, the system AI swept the room for surveillance. The files began to play. Sevatar shut his eyes in pain. Conrad retreated inward and watched in numb horror as the recordings revealed what Nostromo had been doing. The murder of the governor he had appointed, the overthrow of the government he had set up, secret dealings with Xenos, the funneling of scum into the Legion. Treason. Nostromo had lied to him. They had deceived the great imperial Primarch. Conrad Kurze stood, then sank back down with a thud. He should have known. He should have seen it sooner. "My brother," he cried. "It is time for a revolution," Angron answered. "Jell, deploy the drop pods." Sevatar barked. "Sevatar, control your men." The words left Sevatar's mouth before he could think to refuse. When he glanced at Conrad, the Night Haunter gave a heavy, reluctant nod. I believe in you, Conrad Kurz. I believe in your prophecies and all you have done for Nostromo. But now, everything changes. My brother. Angron's grip on Conrad's hand was iron, his gaze fixed. A faint flicker returned to Kurz's eyes. Drop pods screamed from the Redeemer. The Warhound's landing canisters tore the upper atmosphere and showered the world below with sparks. They slammed into the streets of Nostromo like falling comets. Local defenses scrambled, but when blue and white power armor came into view, the sentries reported to command with the explanation they were told to give. This is only a drill. Sevatar cut off the outgoing support signal. He hated the Warhound's interference in Nostromo's affairs, but Angron was right. Nostromo had forgotten fear, and the name of the Night Haunter had been sullied. If the Imperium had known what had become of Nostromo, Sevatar closed his eyes and buried the notion of annihilating the 12th Legion. This was their stain. They must answer for it. Lock down the districts, he ordered. Summon every Night Lord to the tower. He ground his teeth. This was a stain on his legion. Damn insects, he muttered. When the Night Lords filed into the Tower of Night, the hall that once received the Emperor, they found warhounds lining the aisles. Confusion rippled through the assembly. Wary veterans murmured. Terran-born soldiers grew visibly uneasy. Hand over your weapons, Khorne barked, blocking the entrance with his chainblade. Anger flared among the Night Lords, but when Conrad entered with Sevatar, the unrest died as quickly as it had risen. Hand over your weapons, Conrad repeated, voice hoarse and low. His black eyes swept the hall and lingered on each of his scions, men who wore his blood and shared his darkness. Under dark blue carapace, wicked souls glinted. One by one, many of them dropped their weapons at Khorne's feet. Even so, when the alarm sounded, there were always a few who had smuggled small arms into the chamber. Sevatar's gaze locked on them, furious. He wanted to rip them apart. Cousin, Varys said, catching Sevatar's sleeve as he tightened his hand around a bolter. Sevatar's eyes were hard and hungry. Calm yourself, Varys soothed. Do not let rage rule you. He spoke like Angron had spoken to Conrad hours before. Slowly, Sevatar unclenched his fist. I apologize, he muttered. You'll keep this secret, Sevatar asked. Of course, Varys replied. And I do not think there is shame in what you do. It only proves the responsibility and courage of the Night Lords. Sevatar nodded outwardly, but no one could read his true thoughts on his pale face. Conrad's gaze traveled the hall and fixed on Jandor Scalewalk and the men of the 45th Company. Jandor, the tattooed count, had been notorious since youth, a serial killer, a noble hunter who had conspired to topple the government Conrad had built. He had been proud of ensnaring an imperial demigod in his plots. Now the Night Haunter looked at him and laughed, bitter and wounded. Jandor, Conrad called. The Clawmaster of the 45th stepped forward, uneasy and bewildered at being singled out. He knelt a few meters away. Closer, Conrad rasped. Jandor hesitated, then obeyed. He had never expected the two demigods, Conrad Kurz and Angron, to watch him both so closely. His unease deepened. He felt hunted, like one of the noble children he had once hunted himself. The laughter died in Conrad's throat. Without warning, he thrust his hand into Jandor's abdomen. The hall froze. Run! Conrad spat when he flung the man aside. Run and spread the news of death to your family. Bring fear to the upper class. Tell them. Tell all of Nostromo. The Night Haunter has returned. His roar echoed through the chamber. Angron's voice came cold and immediate. Attack, warriors of the 34th Company. Bolters rose. For the first time, warhounds trained their muzzles on their cousins. Bolter fire cracked. The unarmed conspirators fell like wheat under harvest. No match for the high-powered rounds and the warhound's disciplined aim. Conrad fell to his knees and wept, body racked with sobs that seemed to have lived inside him for years. Angron did not comfort him. There was work to be done. He strode over to the mortal scribes and plucked parchment after parchment from trembling hands. Tear them, he ordered. The parchments were shredded and thrown into a pile. Burn it, Angron barked, and Sevatar, silent and exultant, saw to it that the remains were immolated. Angron then looked to the scribes, to the witnesses whose eyes had drunk in the arrival of an imperial demigod. They are useful, he said. Erase them. Sevatar met his gaze and the decision was made. As you wish, Lord Angron. He turned to the nearest medics. Memory alteration. Remove what they have seen. Angron sat down beside Conrad and put an arm around the Night Haunter's shoulders. "Night Haunter," he murmured, "what do you want me to do now?" He wrapped the comfort in a warrior's simplicity and let his psychic presence steady Conrad's anguish, drawing some of it away like a balm. Everything around them was chaos, but for the two demigods, the bond between them was a constant. Nostromo's Hive City 5, the ground on which the Night Haunter once ruled, had forgotten fear over decades, but fear returned tonight, like a tide. The elites who had hidden corruption in the city's bone came to see the cost of their indulgence. "The corruption in your legion is a disease," Angron said quietly to Conrad. "A malignant one." Conrad looked out over the hive. He had tried for years to save this world. Now it seemed beyond saving. But the Warhounds and the Night Lords moved with one purpose: to make the people of Nostromo remember what it meant to fear. For Angron came a howl. For the Emperor. The Warhounds thundered after it, an assault chorus of butchery. The city's upper tiers flickered and went dark as terrified elites hid behind curtains and bolted doors. When news of Jandor Scalewalk's exposure reached them, they called out the hidden retainers who'd served as their muscle for years. At the same time, pockets of Night Lords who had not betrayed their oaths slipped from the shadow and struck. Sevatar's single command, "Kill," was enough. Loyal men rallied to his standard. They did not suffer the stigma of their brother's betrayal. If anything, the Warhounds made room for them, protecting the few Nostromo fighters who still possessed a shred of conscience. The city became a whirlpool of violence. From the dark alleys and hidden vents came assassination attempts, silent figures trying to pick off commanders and Primarchs alike. An internal system alert, an AI feed aboard the Redeemer, chimed in a dry, mechanized voice. Several Night Lords had broken from formation and were attempting to assassinate the two demigods. Lightning and black dust swirled. The Night Haunter's sons revealed their fangs. Khorne and Gel raised their bolters. Gel led Redeemer Guard into the streets to engage traitors openly, while Shen and other loyal Night Lords melted into shadow and tore at the backs of betrayers when the opportunity came. When a traitor lunged from darkness at Angron, a lightning claw flashed and cut the ambusher down before his body could hit the ground. Warm blood ran into grates and along pavement. The sounds of combat, cries, bolter reports, the tearing of flesh, were the city's new hymn. Throughout it all, Conrad moved like a man driven by a single terrible conviction. He gutted an attacker, paid no heed to the body sliding off the hall floor. He felt the smell of rot that had infected his world, and his hands shook with grief and rage. "Can my world still be saved?" Conrad asked, voice raw. Angron had no answer. He was as foreign to Nostromo as a storm. He could not say what the future held for a people whose veins were so full of rot. He looked at the night-broken city and was silent. The system's AI, cold and dispassionate, registered the question and knew it had been addressed to it. "Think of your scions, my brother, those who fight for you, those who suffer as he does beneath the corruption of your homeworld. Slave masters must be purged, oppressors hanged, the guilty given the judgment they deserve. Fear is merely a tool." Angron watched a traitor charge him. He meant to unleash a war cry, but after a fraction of a hesitation, the serrated blade slammed the man to the ground. Under the demigod's strength, the ceramite plating buckled and fused with flesh. Judgment, the traitor managed before the life left him. Conrad Kurze closed his eyes. Had he not always been the judge of men? You must let them see hope, not only fear, hope of freedom instead of the dread of sudden death. Angron's thoughts drifted. When he and the others had been bound for Terra, the Butcher's Nails had already drafted countless reconstruction plans for Nuceria. Under Unimus and the others, Angron had believed Nuceria might be made better, at least for a time. Nostromo, though. Nostromo felt beyond redemption. "Thank you, Angron. You are the only one who trusts me. My brother, the others trust you as well, but perhaps you are a little neurotic." Conrad cupped his head, and for a long moment the two Primarchs regarded each other as if seeing their own reflection. Then Conrad made a decision. He would give these people a chance. Let them choose whether to destroy themselves. Let judgment begin. "Enemy attack!" Varys roared. He was at Sevatar's side now. Perhaps the Primarch had sensed the bond between them, or perhaps something else had shifted. The friction that had once been between them was thawing into a wary cooperation. Automated turrets on a nearby platform trained on the people below and fired a few shells before mysteriously falling silent. Varys snarled, charging into the crowds. "For Angron!" he shouted, smashing traitors aside as he went. "The automated turrets are still active," someone warned. Sevatar reached for Varys and caught only air. "Cover that lunatic," he barked, watching as Varys ran rampant, teeth bared. The Warhounds were maniacs. Sevatar gathered iron warriors and ordered a flank. He followed Varys closely. "Is this how you normally fight?" he asked with thin contempt. "Mind your own business," Varys snapped, using psychic power to hurl a mortal traitor over the edge of the hive. In the distance, several transport ships were trying to take off. "Those mortals are trying to flee. They won't escape," Sevatar said, and in the next instant, intense fire lanced out across the tarmac. "Sevatar, this is Felzarost. Mission accomplished," a voice said over the comms, his legion's chief librarian reporting in. Sevatar snorted. "We Night Lords have sorcerers, too." He turned to see Varys simply using his staff to beat traitors' heads in. For a moment, Sevatar's face flushed with annoyance. Sick. Brainless brute. Nostromo's Hive City 5 was a wound in the planet's underbelly, worse than the 8th Legion's chaos, worse than Kamara. Conspiracy and murder threaded the streets. The brutal society used the living like tools, and the light that once shone in the eyes of the lower classes had been snuffed out. Angron walked the main thoroughfare. Fighting at the upper levels had not yet bled into the depths. Warhounds and Night Lords loyal to Conrad Kurze guarded every entrance to the lower tiers, while traitors tried desperately to slip their families and the powerful off-world. They all knew this was the endgame. The mortals here were walking corpses. Even Nuceria's slaves had once clung to a sliver of hope. These people had had theirs ground down long ago by a sunless life. The mortals who had once fought for liberation, those who had tried to pull Nostromo up from its own rot, hung from lampposts on some forgotten street. Conrad and Angron crouched in shadow, watching gangs insult, batter, and kill their own. "I have seen your legion's combat records. My scions have fought alongside yours," Angron said softly. System feeds kept pushing battle data into his mind, streams of the Night Lord's engagements. He hesitated. "If you don't help your brother, who will?" The AI whispered. "People can change," it continued. "Primarchs shape scions. Fear and cruelty are tools, not a license to unloose one's own wickedness. Your legion hungers for punishment, but that hunger will not liberate the working masses. Punishment will not create order." Angron pointed to a gang bullying a child down an alley. "Most Terran-born of the 8th are criminals," he said. "Most of the 12th are bloodthirsty brutes." "In your world, they are the same coin," Conrad muttered, crouching like a beaten thing. He looked small for a moment. "In that case," Angron continued, "my brother, what will become of that child?" Conrad stared at the boy being lifted and jostled. "He will die." "I thought so," Angron said, stretching. "If you save him, he will likely grow up to kill others and die miserably in some street fight. That is his fate." "What if I don't save him? Will he die?" Conrad asked, a hard, dull hope in his tone. "Yes, he will," Angron answered. Conrad's face hardened with the cold logic he'd always favored. At that moment, the street corner's wiring sparked. A flare of light and a hiss of steam startled the gang. A mechanical gate, old and rusted, groaned open, either from age or some failing mechanism. The boy bolted into the night. Conrad's eyes cut to Angron. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I did nothing," Angron said honestly. Conrad did not believe it. Nostromo, he thought, beyond saving. He stepped forward, voice raw with fury. "You damned insects! You Nostromo parasites! The Night Haunter will return to punish you." Then, impossibly, the child came back. He stumbled into the light, face streaked with tears, clutching a small wooden stick. He screamed and wailed like a lunatic, but there was a fierce edge beneath it. Angron looked at Conrad. "I tried to grant him courage, brother. I succeeded." Before Conrad could respond, Angron shoved him down. "Your people need you, Conrad Kurze." Conrad hit the ground. Angron folded his arms, and in a tone both casual and terrible asked, "This world is waiting to be rebuilt. Nail, what should we do?" System interjections tumbled through Angron's mind. Plans from the butcher's nails, proposals for restructuring the world. One of them lit his eyes. "Will he agree?" the system asked. "Yes," it answered. After all, this planet cannot get worse. In the dark, the boy's nose bled and his knees trembled, but he did not run. Some small, improbable courage kept him there. Facing the gang again, he shouted, "The Night Haunter will punish you." "He will," the boy roared. "Ha! He left Nostromo long ago." One of the thugs jeered, trying to strip the moment of meaning. With the Night Haunter gone, their fear evaporated, and the city sank into deeper decay. "He will return. He will," the boy screamed, choking on sobs. Angron's words had found a place in Conrad's mind. In the darkness around them, that word, Night Haunter, condensed into something physical, a memory made solid. The imagination of terror the men had buried for years rose up like a fog. Then the alley answered, a long-forgotten dread clawing back from their crowded past. "The Night Haunter!" a voice shrieked, the sound raw and close. Hearing that, the gang turned. Their bravado shattered as the echo of the name uncoiled every buried fear. Around the boy, shadow and memory became accusation and threat. The alley filled with a heart-wrenching terror as the men tried to flee, some stumbling, some turning to run, all of them suddenly children before a darkness they thought had left them forever. Chapter 38, Going Too Far. Blood seeped uncontrollably from the wound. Jandor Scalewalk clutched his chest. The hole left by the Primarch's strike still oozed fresh crimson. Even a madman and pervert like him bled the same as any other. He had already sent word back to his family. Their panic might draw the Loyalists' attention. He wanted to live. No matter what, he wanted to live. When Jandor Scalewalk stumbled into the small room, only 2 loyal cronies accompanied him. He drew a ragged breath and ignored the bodies scattered across the floor. "They've already searched this place," one of the men muttered, eyes flicking over the blood hole in Jandor's chest as his electronic goggles blinked. "They won't come back for a while." "The Scalewalk family's escape ship's been destroyed," the other added. "The Warhounds and the Night Haunter have blockaded the whole planet. My lord, perhaps we—" "I don't understand," Jandor said, head bowed, sweat beading on his pale face. "How did they find out?" No one had an answer. Whether it was the Warhounds or something else, none of them knew. They only knew they were trapped in a vortex of death and dread, and they knew Conrad Kersey's methods. "All right, we should go." Jandor snapped out of it and yanked the door open. He had to get out. Nostromo was no longer safe for him. He had a plan. Return to the main hall, hide in the shadows until the Night Lord's search passed, then start anew. The Emperor would not allow 2 legions to waste time hunting every traitor on a single world. The Great Crusade was everything. A hoarse voice cut through the air. "How did you know he was here?" Jandor froze. He looked out into the street and saw the forces assembled. Sevatar, Shen, Gel, Khorne, Varys, and Felzarost, the Redeemer Guard standing like a line of iron, and Night Lords perched on the surrounding rooftops. There was nowhere to run. "This is my father's greatness," Khorne grunted, swinging his chainsword as he fixed the traitor with a cold stare. "It's over. It's all over." Jandor let out a ragged laugh that sounded like a curse. "My brothers, aren't we all the same? Aren't your hands stained with innocent blood as well? Think of what Conrad Kersey is doing to me now. He will come for you too." "We are of one kind," someone returned. "Conrad Kersey and I are the same, but that coward refuses to admit it. I admit it." The Night Haunter's words came like a shadow across the crowd. Conrad Kersey stepped forward, as if drawn out of the dark itself, a small boy sitting on his shoulder. The gathered warriors bowed, making a passage for the Primarch. "I admit I paid you too little heed," Conrad said quietly. "My brother is right. I have wandered in illusions for too long." He looked at Jandor. "You have snuffed the last glimmer of hope on this world." Jandor Scalewalk. Conrad sat down on a low step and regarded his scions. Then he glanced at the child on his shoulder. The boy would join the Night Lords and die somewhere in their campaign. His fate had been altered. It wasn't Angron, Conrad thought. It was the thing on his head that had changed the future. He smiled then, a sudden, almost childlike smile the Night Lords had never seen from him before. "But there is still a spark." "Do you want to face judgment or keep running?" Conrad asked. Sevatar stepped forward. "Sevatar, rectify the Legion, and I will not suffer another oppressor." Conrad turned his attention away from Jandor. The traitor's fate had already been sealed. Jandor made one last desperate move. "Cover me!" he screamed, shoving his two companions forward and trying to slip past them. He crashed into a broad figure in the next instant. Angron watched him hit the ground. "I feel your fear," the Lord said, voice like steel. He lifted his chain axe. "Is this the future you saw, brother?" he called. Conrad heard Angron's challenge and shook his head. "No, not at all, my brother." "Then you see, your eyes are clouded by illusion." "Redemption Guard," Angron roared. The warhounds answered with a thunderous cry. "Purge this world of oppressors with your cousins." The chain axe fell. Limbs were torn from Jandor's body. He writhed and screamed on the ground as blood painted the stones. "Nostromo is poison, Angron," Conrad said to his brother as if it were obvious. "I will see it cleansed." Conrad watched his fallen scions and then turned to Angron. "Nuceria will take care of them." Angron nodded and took the small boy from Conrad's shoulder. The two Primarchs had struck a bargain. The righteous youth of Nostromo would be sent to Nuceria for education, and when they came of age, they would return to help rebuild. There was still much to be done. When the nobles were strung up from the towers, their deaths failed to lift the crowd's spirits. If anything, the mood deepened. Nostromo had already endured one great purge before Conrad left. Now a second purge was beginning. Sevatar did not know how long the cleansing would last, but he knew its necessity. "Hang them all," Sevatar ordered coldly, watching the massive nobles with a stony expression. The Night Lords needed reform. "Hang them? That's hardly your usual style, cousin," Varys observed, leaning in. Sevatar's only reply was a snort. Varys shrugged. "Fine. Consider the Night Lords owing the warhounds a debt and be quiet." "Then," Fel-Zarost stepped closer. "When this is done, I'll see you in the octagonal cage." Sevatar turned away. Varys laughed softly. "Phew, no repayment yet? But perhaps we can have a proper conversation later." "Of course, cousin," Fel-Zarost replied with a nod. He shook his head at Varys' audacity. The man seemed to be courting trouble. Chapter 39. The Warhound's Little Dessert. A month had been lost. The Great Crusade stalled for an entire month because of Nostromo. Nostromo City 5, the Night Fortress, where the 8th Legion had redecorated their master's outpost. The city had become a macabre gallery, hanging slave masters and the wicked displayed among countless tortured, inverted corpses. Hundreds of thousands of corpses floated high above the streets. It was not the Night Lords alone who had crafted this horror. The warhounds had taken part too, though many of Angron's veterans looked on in disgust. A new order was being fashioned. The two Primarchs, collaborating with imperial superhumans and aided by Nuceria, had drawn up laws and systems for Nostromo. The planet's children would be sent to Nuceria to be raised until they came of age, then returned to help build their homeland. In the system AI's original plan, Nostromo's infants should have been sent to the 500 worlds, where resources and education were superior to Nuceria's. Conrad Kurz had vetoed that. "I only trust you, my brother," he had said. Of all the choices in the warp's dark calculus, Conrad believed only Angron could soothe the darkness in him and accept the visions he carried. For the first time in a long while, Conrad allowed a spark of hope to live. The system AI kept feeding data on the star systems around them. The ghoul stars were riddled with Xenos, and here the Astronomican's light was faint. Nostromo sat at that dim region's edge. The Night Lords' reach into the ghoul stars had been limited. Thousands of planets waited in the dark for salvation. Nostromo and the feudal world of Drask formed a fragile defensive line, but it was not enough. Many future campaigns would see Space Marine chapters falter in that sector. The system AI hoped the 12th Legion and the 8th Legion would cooperate. Their homeworlds were distant from each other, and Conrad trusted Angron. At least for now, that trust held. When the door to the command chamber opened, Gel, Khorne, and Varys stepped in. Gel watched Angron as the Primarch plugged the butcher's nails into a data panel, a strange junction of savagery and technology. "My father!" Gel exclaimed, as if startled by the sight. Angron did not look up immediately. He worked with the brutal private ritual as though it were part of governance. Gel and the others had grown used to these spectacles. "What is it?" someone asked softly, but the warhounds and the Night Lords already had enough to occupy them. Nostromo would be remade, and the Great Crusade would wait until the work was done. Angron opened his eyes and looked at Gel. "My father, The Nostromo Astropathic Choir has received a message. An Imperial Navy vessel went missing and sent a distress signal before it vanished. Jell looked back. Normally, he wouldn't have reported such a minor matter to Angron. There's a squad of Sisters of Silence aboard. Angron narrowed his eyes. Sisters of Silence? It looked like his father had tried to interfere, and whatever he had done had backfired. Find the last location the distress signal came from. Does Conrad Kurtz know? Lord Conrad Kurtz is aware. He has already mustered the Night Lords. Then what are we waiting for? Move out. Jell and the others glanced at Angron. He stared for a moment at the butcher's nails pulsing in his skull, then barked. All right. He yanked out the data neural interface. The electric sting of the ship's AI arc lingered across his nerves, but Angron grinned through it. At nightfall, on his black throne, Conrad Kurtz sat with a clarity that had been absent for some time, though the old visions still flickered at the edges of his sight. He ran a hand over a fresh skull set into the armrest, the head of Jandor Scalawak, a scion who had betrayed him. A band of red dye streaked the ivory, a crude symbol of the uneasy bond between the Night Lords and the Warhounds. Conrad lowered his gaze. Angron has returned to the redemption. Then we will go, see what our father has been meddling with now. He spoke to Sevatar. The name of his favored scion filled the hall. Sevatar rose, puzzled. Since the last crisis, he had noticed a change in his father. Whether that change was good or ill, Conrad was at least paying more attention to the Legion, and that alone pleased him. Send a team to Nuceria to study the Butcher's Nails device, Conrad ordered. Sevatar inclined his head. He produced a small box. The red and gold wrapping marked it unmistakably as a Nucerian speciality. This was entrusted to Varys by Lord Angron to give to you. Lord Angron said to eat more. He fears you'll be blown away by the wind. Conrad took the box, cracked it open, and peered inside at a row of little bat-shaped confections. For a moment, something like joy uncoiled inside him, and he laughed, a hoarse, unexpected sound. He clutched his midriff, shoulders hunched, tears on his face. The laughter was so raw and sudden that the assembled scions froze, unsure whether to breathe. Sevatar, Conrad said softly, has your duel with Varys begun? Not yet, Sevatar replied. Defeat him, my son. The single word hit Sevatar like a blow. He had not heard his gene-father call him son in a long time. He bowed his head, a weight settling into him. He had once meant to spare Varys, out of gratitude for the 12th Legion's aid, but now the Primarchs' renewed attention turned that leniency into a new purpose, to crush Varys beneath his boots and make Conrad see it. He opened the box. All right, little bats, taste the Warhound's craftsmanship. Conrad's moods had calmed since some of his turmoil had been siphoned away by Angron. The scions clustered, peered at the sweets, then dove in. Sevatar and Shen were first, popping the bat-shaped pastries into their mouths. Is it good? Conrad asked. Too sweet, Bob, Sevatar judged. Conrad nodded, and a small, private amusement flickered across his face. Meanwhile, the 13th Expeditionary Fleet dropped out of the warp above a feudal world. System AI's first impulse was to hack planetary systems, but it found no electronics to pry into. The world had no devices. The AI's frustration was palpable. Angron felt it, and it made him laugh, which in turn set off another electric jolt from the ship's interface. Jell! Angron howled as the current danced through him. I'm fine. Gel watched him twitch and wondered how sincere that claim was. Still, he obeyed. Send diplomatic envoys to the world below. As you wish, Angron managed. With the envoys launched, System AI swept the star system for any sign of the missing ship. It probed for signal residues where the Holy Mission had last broadcast. There was nothing, no residue, no warp signature, not even a trace. Angron, wait, System AI said. It was considering other means. Use your brain. Angron blinked. His brain? Then System AI added simply, your psyker. Angron understood instantly. He let his inner power loose, first covering the ship, and then, as if a leash had been cut, feeling himself lifted. A tremendous psychic presence burst from him, colors and feeling that made even the Warhound's librarians look up. Light flowed around Angron as he floated a full hand's breadth off the deck. The librarians stared, alarm and awe digging into their faces. Varys put a restraining hand out to still them. An unbridled psyker was a terrifying thing. The psychic sweep poured outward, filling the fleet and reaching down toward the world and out among the stars. Varys watched Angron and felt a strange, encompassing sensation, neither warm nor sharp, but an ease that soothed old wounds. For a moment he saw the scarred place within Angron, the thing that had been healed. "Librarians," Varys called, and then realized he was the one faltering. A fatigue like a soft tide rolled over him, his limbs grew heavy, and his eyes wanted to close. The closest librarian crumpled where he stood. One by one, the other librarians on the bridge buckled and fell. The gentle numbing that came with Angron's projection robbed them of resistance. The bridge sealed with a thunk. "Wizard," someone cursed. Khorne snatched up Varys as the latter sagged toward the floor and slapped him across the face. Varys snapped awake in a flash, blinking as if from a dream. He had just been watching Angron waving at him from an arena of light. "What are you doing, you brute?" Varys barked at Khorne. "My lord is perceiving the entire star system. He seems to have found something." Khorne answered, half alarmed, half triumphant. Varys squinted at Angron, then at the data flowing through System AI. For all the scale of Angron's sight, for all the raw force unleashed, nothing tangible had been found. System AI groaned under the weight of the impossible data. Angron opened his eyes. In the space around the fleet, in addition to his scions and the warhounds, a few familiar figures had come near. Felzarost and Sevatar among them. "Great Lord of Red Sand," Angron asked, voice even, "can you tell me what the situation is there?" Felzarost met his gaze and answered, blunt and brief. "There's a problem with the world below." "What problem?" Angron repeated. Felzarost reddened with some frustration at the question. He did not want to speak of particulars in front of so many. "I don't know." Sevatar and Felzarost exchanged a look. For both of them, and for everyone gathered in that weighty silence, the mystery only deepened, as if the world below had simply been swallowed whole, leaving nothing but the echo of its disappearance. Then, Felzarost was about to ask if Angron would allow them to return when the System AI's voice cut through the bridge. "Found it." "Found what?" Angron frowned. The system couldn't reach into his mind with psychic energies, but it could translate electrical and electromagnetic patterns into data. Given enough input, it could always find what it needed. The long, regular fluctuation on the AI's panel flagged something odd on the planet below. "I think that squad of Sisters of Silence might be in trouble." The information startled Angron. "How did you find out?" "Right, Felzarost, Sevatar, go back now." Without waiting for questions, Angron waved the two Night Lords away. He descended to the deck and walked up to the tactical projection, all eyes following him. "After your psychic sweep," the System AI explained, "when I scanned the star system, I extracted anomalous electrical signatures and what may be psychic emissions. Everything follows patterns." "Angron Unit 2, you performed well," the AI added. "What did I do?" Angron rubbed his temple, irritated. "There are Xenos below. They're very well hidden, but be prepared for the worst. The planet may be under Xenos control." "Gel! Sound the alarm! No ambassador. Prepare for battle." Gel's voice rose. Angron's certainty had shifted him. "What have you discovered, my father?" Gel demanded, staring at Angron's sudden hardening. "Not specifics yet," Angron said, "but we'll know soon. Prepare for combat." He clapped a hand on Gel's shoulder. "Did you hear me? Prepare for battle." Gel roared and moved to mobilize the Stormbird's complements. Conrad Kurze, over the comm, asked if Angron had information. "Tell Conrad to let the children sleep," Angron replied with a wry smile. A second Stormbird set down in the kingdom's square, and Conrad Kurze disembarked, pale and ill, with Shen at his side. Before he could speak, another vision struck him. Angron framed by raging flames, a mountain of corpses behind him, and Angron's roar. "Brother." Conrad's confusion cut as deep as the image. "I am a prince of the Imperium of Man," System AI intoned as if reciting a protocol. "By command of the Emperor of Mankind." At that, the butcher's nails in Angron's skull flared and thrashed, a pain and a fury that made every nerve sing. "Tracing data. Trace complete." The AI scrolled through corroborating feeds on its panel, then paused as if doubting its own readout. After Angron finished speaking, the world's king sank to his knees and lowered his noble head. "I will join the Imperium of Man," he offered. Angron stared. The scene should have reassured him, but nothing felt right. System AI's voice came again, flat and mechanical. "Angron Unit 2, there is bad news and worse news." Two pieces of bad news. Angron's jaw tightened. He could feel the nails itching at the edges of his reason. "We must kill them," the system said almost matter-of-factly. Angron's mouth opened in disbelief. He wasn't an executioner by temperament, yet the nails and the data pushed him. "Butcher's nails?" he asked, trying to find a foothold. "Let me show you," the AI replied, and fed the tactical holos a cascade of images and signals. What the display revealed spread a cold sorrow through Angron that infected everyone in the projection chamber. The images were blunt and unambiguous. Ritual diagrams, strange glyphs, transmitted psychic resonances linked to the name Hroffen, carcasses where there should have been processions, men and women prostrating before devices and whispering into the dark. "Jel," Angron said, voice thin. "My father?" Jel's face crumpled. "Kill them," Angron added on a whisper that became command. Jel hesitated. For a heartbeat, he couldn't understand why his lord would order such slaughter. "My father! Warhounds, fire!" Khorne didn't wait for debate. He fired his bolter, and the first shots cracked through the morning air. The mortal crowd erupted into panic. Gel lunged to check the warhounds, to restrain the inevitable if he could. "Do you think you hid yourselves well?" Angron snarled. "Do you expect your masters to come to your aid? I'll hang you with your masters, Xeno's lackeys." Angron seized the god of war's roar, and his face contorted with a fury that made him almost unrecognizable. "My lord, this must be a misunderstanding," Gel pleaded, stepping forward. Angron's voice was iron. "The butcher's nails told me everything." Gel's eyes widened with horror. The butcher's nails were instruments of torment, not oracle stones. Was Angron's mind breaking? Still, the images on the system's display, combined with the nail's scream, left little room for doubt in Angron's mind. "We must liberate this world from Xenos," he declared. "No," the king cried, stumbling to his knees. "We are innocent. If you wish to take this world, spare my people. They are innocent. Spare my children." "So you and your priests conspired to sacrifice us to your masters, the Xenos called Hroffen?" Angron accused. The king's face registered a fresh, raw shock. How had Angron discovered that? The mortal's pleas hung in the air, and guilt gnawed at those who hesitated. Jel, seeing the king's expression, felt responsibility coil in his gut for their rush to violence. "Don't blame yourself, child," Angron said softly, placing his hand on Gel's shoulder. "This is what the Xenos wanted you to see. You did well." Then, flat and inexorable, "Kill them." At that moment, several figures at the edge of the square produced strange carbines and squeezed triggers. Night Lords emerged from shadow like knives made flesh. Lightning claws flashed. A soldier's chest opened before his finger could complete the pull. Blood and light mixed in an instant. "These are Xenos called Hroffen," the system AI announced. "Be cautious. They exhibit psychic signatures. If I had not detected the psychic ripples—" "Thank you," Angron said, voice rough with something close to gratitude. He turned his head toward Conrad Kurze. "Did you see it?" "A little," Conrad murmured, lowering his gaze. What he'd seen was only a shard, but it was enough. Angron shut his eyes. If not for the nails and the system's data, he might have been deceived by a plausible surrender. Now the urgency was clear. This world, if truly compromised, had to be freed. Under Gel's escort, Angron strode into the melee. He passed through panic and falling bodies without hesitation and cleaved a kingdom soldier clean in two, as though the man were only a reed. The demigod's power made a mockery of mortal defenses. It was absolute, remorseless, and utterly terrifying. Section 28, Angron stared into the patch of darkness. Conrad Kurd stood there like a living shadow, cutting down mortal after mortal. The bodies crumpled and bled out in a red, silent rain. A cold system voice recorded Kurz's data while warning Angron, "Do not emulate him." Kurz only snapped back, "I am myself." The system AI flagged another anomaly. They went beneath the palace. I've recorded a psyker fluctuation. It then registered something worse. Unit 2, these Xenos have an entire fleet in the star system. Angron's brow tightened. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "How the hell would I know? I'm not some omnipotent robot cat." Angron didn't know what a robot cat was, but he felt the butcher's nails were considerably more omnipotent. The AI noticed, almost fondly, that Angron trusted it too much. Blind trust was dangerous. It worried about what might happen the day some spirit slipped in while it wasn't watching. Jel and the others kept close. Angron's rage roared like a living thing. Even when he slowed his stride so they could keep up, he moved like a demigod. The sons of Angron smashed through mortal ranks as they ran, keeping formation. The difference between a space marine and a human was a gulf. Still, the mortals fought without fear. Khorne swung a chainsword at Angron's side, every arc shredding a life. Jel took the front with a huge shield. The Redemption Guard Terminators, Terran-born veterans, poured out fire, and the palace rang with the prayers of the dying. "Jel," Angron bellowed. "My father," Gel answered. "An entire Xenos fleet is waking up. Tell the fleet in orbit to destroy them." "Understood, my father." Gel relayed the warning to the Imperial Navy. Varys, the chief librarian, felt something prickling at the edge of his senses, a subtle psyker energy. He caught it and shouted, "Librarians, psyker attack!" He could not tell whether it came from a human psyker or an alien one. The warning set the librarians on edge. As space itself shimmered, bat-winged creatures Hrafn erupted from the flames. "Open fire!" Gel screamed. "Tear them apart!" Angron roared as the Xenos struck. Annihilator carbines spat rounds that were not mere slugs but psyker-forged projectiles. A warp storm coalesced, and a Terran veteran took the full force of it. Angron hauled him back, but half the man had been pulverized into a bloody spray. No screams rose. A son of Angron did not beg. The twin-linked bolter stuttered and then thundered. "For the Emperor! For Angron!" the veteran shouted with what remained of him, even though his right arm and leg were gone. "Apothecary!" Varys exploded with a savage psychic backlash. He could not bear a brother harmed by Xenos and shredded the nearest Hrafn into nothing. Angron surged forward, axes raised. "Protect the Gene Father," Jel cried. Just as Angron brought the serrated axe down, the system AI snapped a warning into his head. "Dodge. That long blade is unstable." A Xenos with a long black blade of warp matter shimmered into being, and the weapon detonated, obliterating half of the Hrafn that held it. Angron yanked the axe up and pivoted, hauling his men back to the center of the Redeemer Guard. "Watch the ones with the long blades," the AI said. "They're unstable bombs. Use bolters, not melee." Angron roared and prepared to charge again. "Above you," the AI barked. He looked up and saw them, Hrafn clinging to the ceiling like bats, each clutching the corpses of mortals, hearts ripped out, all of them. Hundreds of carcasses sloughed loose and began to fall. "Damn it," Angron cursed. "Above us! Retreat 50 meters, the AI ordered. "Retreat 50 meters. Angron echoed, but as they turned, he saw more Hrafn pouring in behind them. The rear path was choke-full when the ceiling shattered. Dozens of warhounds and night lords dropped down into the breach. "Run now," the AI shouted. Angron pulled the veteran, already half unconscious from the blast, into his arms. Weapon incoming. Above orbit, cruisers flexed their hulls and focused energy weapons down toward the planet. White streams erupted and melted the palace roof. Stone turned to molten crimson and exploded into shockwaves that slammed everyone to the ground. Conrad Kurze, who had briefly felt grim satisfaction at aiding his brother, was thrown against a wall, his pale face drained even whiter. Angron lay flat over the veteran to shield him. The Hrafn behind them were vaporized in the beam's wake, reduced to gray ash and warped remnants. "Next time, give me a warning, Nail," Angron muttered, staring at the smoldering ruins where the Xenos had been. Gel hauled himself up, staring at the devastation. "How dare the Navy?" "Enough, Gel. It was my order," Angron cut him off. Khorne and Gel regarded their lord with disbelief at the recklessness of the bombardment. "That was suicidal," Gel said, struggling for tone. He wanted to praise Angron. Instead, he restrained himself. Conrad Kurz came over and looked at the melted palace. He fancied himself the most unhinged brother, but perhaps Angron had a claim to that title now. "Nail," he said. Angron's annoyance was a thin thing. "Just tell me whether it went through. Next time, warn me first." "Why didn't you just drop an exterminatus on our heads?" he asked weakly. The last line echoed more loudly than he intended. "Brother, maybe. Don't exterminate us our own heads," Kurza said, trying to force a smile that came out strained. "I was only joking." Angron sighed. For the Night Lords and the Warhounds alike, the Hrafn had been a new and terrible thing, a Xenos they had not seen before, and one that had left ash and questions in its wake. Unlike the usual Xenos, these were a psyker species. During the initial engagement, led by the Imperial demigod, the 13th Imperial Expeditionary Fleet had taken surprisingly light losses. Angron and Conrad Kurz stood at the lip of a vast vitrified pit. The ground beneath their feet was black glass, cracked and pierced by the weapon. The royal palace had been blown into ruins. Under the remote control of the system AI, countless Hrafen had been cut down by precision strikes, but some still survived. "There is something down there," Angron said. Kurz knew almost nothing about this breed of Xenos. "Brother, have you ever met them before?" Angron frowned. "No. The Ghoul Stars have many Xenos, but this is the first I've seen." Kurz answered bluntly. He, too, was seeing this heart-eating, civilization-bearing thing for the first time. Angron touched the base of his skull and felt the burning pull of the butcher's nails, the hive of fury that helped the Sky Fleet in its work. "Will anything happen if I go down?" "No," said the system AI. "No," answered another voice in perfect unison, exactly the answer Angron wanted to hear. "What of the mortals on this world?" he asked. Varys's eyes were hollow with sadness when he replied, "My lord, they have been enslaved too long." From the lowest commoner to the highest nobility, corruption had crept through them all. This world had been hollowed out. There was no salvation left. Angron closed his eyes. He did not know what his other brothers would do, but he knew what he would do: kill the culprits. "We'll need heavy fire support," he said, looking into the pit where the Xenos had dug themselves in like a nest. "My lord, the Dreadnought veterans are ready," Jel reported, stepping forward. He crouched near Angron and noted the steel wires with their green phosphorescent flow along the back of the Primarch's head, an undercurrent of enforced fury beneath that calm tone. "Let the veterans stretch their bones." Yellow flame tore the sky as drop pods screamed out. When the first pod slammed into the shattered palace, the remaining structure collapsed entirely. A dreadnought's foot hit the vitrified ground, and a buzzing sound filled the air. The voice of a chapter master risen to war, Logar. "They're breathing insults the air around me," Logar rasped. "Fight with me, warhounds. I will not let a single Xenos escape our judgment. For honor, for my father, for the Emperor." Heavy bolters spun, and the dreadnoughts edged toward the pit. The veterans landed first. Behind them, superhuman warriors of the Imperium followed onto the glass-strewn plain. The ruined darkness exhaled the scent of roasting flesh. Angron's eyes adjusted, and he saw charred human corpses hung upside down in the caves like sacrifices. His lips curled into a snarl. Before Angron could shout a command, the warhounds had already formed a ring and opened fire in coordinated arcs. Plasma cannons heated and held under stress. Twin-linked bolters chewed through Xeno's hide. "For my lord, for the Emperor, for the Imperium, for humanity," the veterans roared, unleashing a tidal slaughter. Flames licked the ground and twisted like living things. In the black mouths of the caves there was only fury and slaughter. Conrad Kurze led his scions through the shadow to spread terror among the Xenos, while Angron led a frontal onslaught, an axe and rage that sought to repay the audacity of these creatures. The god of war roared anew and cleaved another Hrafen in two. More poured from the dark, winged shapes like a storm. Traitors, kings and priests who had bartered humanity's blood, fled toward a tunnel. System AI screamed in Angron's mind. Compared to Angron, who reveled in the killing, the AI's display flashed a steady cascade of red warnings. "Psyker attack! Psyker attack! Warning! Warning!" it barked, and began to thicken Angron's force shield. "Don't be a brute," the system pleaded. A blue psychic storm struck from the immaterium, hot and cold at once. The AI vomited out a burst of emotional data to blunt it. When psychic power slammed into the emotional surge, sparks and empty annihilation flared through the space. A Hrafen warrior stared at the carbine in his hand as if the world had ceased to make sense. "Warhounds, attack!" Angron roared, kicking and smashing a Hrafen's skull beneath his boot. Above the void, drop pods tore out of the atmosphere, fiery tails like meteors. Flight paths layered and locked. Each pod adjusted minutely and landed without deviation. Centurions stepped from their pods with a bellow, "To the Gene-Father's side!" Warhounds surged through the ruined city, butchering the Emperor's enemies. Angron crushed another skull. "Where are the nail carriers?" he barked. "I'm busy." System AI snapped back in a dry thread of data. "You're keeping me occupied." Beams of light stabbed within the pit, and the dim, cramped scene reminded Angron of Nuceria's caves. The Hrafen took to the air, circling and using their aerial advantage to pin Angron and his men beneath them. Angron glanced skyward. "Can we fire the weapon again?" If you want to die, don't take me with you, System AI replied. Everyone, save the two Primarchs, was already underground. Another strike from orbit would leave only two standing. Librarians, Varys ordered, eyes on the swirling psychers above. Against a psyker species, the Warhound's librarians had to hold the line. Psychic chatter erupted, clipped and frantic. Varys, what should we do? There are too many of them. Reinforcements. I need reinforcements here. 3 Xenos on my left. They fought in 2 realms at once, the physical and the immaterium. Varys, as chief librarian, poured his torrent of thought into every mind, overwhelming and steadying them. There is no time. We must perform the rite now, he sent, and one by one the librarians converged their consciousness into a single focus. The air around them fell away in temperature. Frost spidered across pauldrons and the ground. Delicate ice bloomed around the pit. The librarians intoned a dirge in the tongue of the warp and the material. "Protect the librarians!" Angron shouted, planting the haft of his axe through the neck of a Hrothgar as his axe's arc cleared a circle of safety. "Your children are performing a ritual. Protect them," the System AI advised. "Now?" Angron asked. "Now," the AI replied. Gel and Khorne moved with him. "Protect me," Angron barked, laughing, then poured his own psychic presence into the weave. The combined potency of the 12th Legion's librarians shaped itself into the psychic image of an ancient warrior, an apparition as tall and terrible as Angron himself, an image only the mind's eye could see. Varys's deep voice threaded through the formation. "Follow." For a heartbeat, Varys tried to lead the assembled librarians to charge the circling Raffen, but then he felt an unfamiliar, scalding warmth join their ranks. It was not any librarian he knew. It was the Gene Father's presence, sudden, vast, and incandescent. Angron felt strangely self-conscious. He had never been subtle with his gifts, but some things the Primarchs did better than their sons. The moment Angron pushed his will into the shared weave, the psychic warrior that the librarians had made flared, steadied, and became more than an image. It became a focus of wrath that stung the Hrothgar minds and steadied the warhounds below, and the ritual closed around the tunnel mouth like an iron ring. "My lord, we follow you." Varys's voice rang out, flickering like a weak light. Angron watched his scions link their consciousness to their bodies with threads as thin as spider silk, an incredibly dangerous weave. An ancient warrior bowed his body before Angron's psychic form like a loyal knight before his king, offering everything without reservation. If Angron willed it, the life and death of those librarians rested on a single thought. "Stop having distracting thoughts." "What the hell?" one of the scions blurted. "Wait, how did you follow me here?" "The electrical signals in your brain are a bit chaotic," System AI reported. "Can you regulate them?" When the librarians heard their Gene Father speaking in a strange voice, scattered thoughts rose among them. "Quiet, everyone. This is another personality of my lord," Varys explained, trying to steady them. System AI, however, wanted to resolve Angron's neural chaos with something close to electroshock therapy. He was forced to do everything at once: manage the fleet, help Angron and his scions stabilize their fields here, and hunt for the Hrothgar leader inside a region saturated with psychic turbulence. A tireless beast of burden, indeed. The air warmed rapidly. Scorching flames ignited, and as the sons of Angron watched, Angron's figure took form in the dark, wielding a massive axe, the green butcher's nails glowing where they pierced his skull, golden power armor flashing like a comet across the void. His psychic presence carved an axe stroke through the sky toward the massed Hrothgar. Flames erupted. Under the combined psychic weight of Angron and the librarians, the aliens began to combust. They wailed and burst open like fireworks. "My lord!" someone cried. Gel saw Khorne kneeling on the ground in excitement and kicked him. "What are you doing, Khorne?" Khorne stammered. "Don't forget the Gene Father's orders," Gel snapped. The order was to protect their body's integrity. No kneeling. Khorne straightened, contrite. "My apologies. Protect Father." Gel's eyes slid back to Angron's psychic form. "My lord, they're breaking in." Across the throng, a mortal king knelt before a shadowed throne. The Hrothgar leader watched with cold green eyes from that throne. He said nothing. When he waved a hand, the kneeling king simply burst apart, flesh and blood scattering into a bloody mist that scented the air. The Hrothgar leader felt only boredom. When he looked to the priest beside the throne, The priest fell to his knees and begged, "Great master, I beg for your mercy." A sound like a dismissive snort. Then Conrad Kurze appeared from nowhere and completely impaled the priest on his lightning claw, lifting him off the floor. The Raffen leader narrowed his eyes. He felt a threat in this dark, grinning human. "Shh!" Conrad Kurze put a finger to his lips. "Human, this is my slave, and you will also become my slave." He tossed the priest aside and laughed, oddly cheerful amid the dust, blood, and stench of corpses, scratching his helmet with his lightning claw. "My brother, someone wants to enslave me. Then slaughter him. Chop off his head. Tear him to pieces." Angron's voice thundered. The Raffen leader glanced at Angron, who dragged the corpse of one of his kin. "Alien slave master," the Raffen sneered. "You will die a miserable death. I won't let you die quickly. Start praying." Angron cradled the God of War's roar in his hands and grinned, a malicious curl to his lips. "P.S. My stored chapters ran out. I need to start preparing chapters again. Are there no votes for 4 chapters a day either? I feel like I'm playing a single-player game in the Great Silence. Boo-hoo-hoo. Good luck to all the brothers taking the college entrance exams." Volume 1, Chapter 46, Chapter 45, The Winged Paper Man. Angron had faced Psyker species before, on arena sands above the High Hive of Maldon, and none had survived him. The Raffen leader rose from his corrupted throne. Taller than the rest, his bat-like wings wide, he straightened to match Angron's height. Candlelight guttered out. Angron, who hated darkness, felt unease and raised his chain axe. "Do you need help?" System AI asked. "Then hurry up." Angron snapped. A sonic psychic shockwave slammed toward him. Angron planted the God of War's roar before his chest to block it. He couldn't stop the entire impact. His power armor groaned. Instinct made him swing the axe at a high-speed blur, but he hit nothing. The Hraffen's curved, clawed foot struck Angron in the chest like a forging hammer. Pain lanced through him. He felt the bones in his chest protesting. This might hurt a little. System AI noted. Angron scoffed inwardly. Pain was old company, but then a hoarse animal howl tore from his throat. The scream rippled through the ranks. The sons of Angron flinched. Even Conrad Kurze tightened his grip on his lightning claw, trying to read what was happening. Within the gray mist, the Raffen leader had spun from psychic force. The darkness hid trajectories and missiles, but also opportunity. The Raffen leader lunged, psychic missiles streaking. Whatever maddening influence the butcher's nails poured into Angron's skull now steadied him. Time itself seemed to drag slow. Angron moved, and the Raffen leader's eyes widened in shock as the massive warrior dodged several sonic waves with uncanny speed. The great demigod, nimble as a sapling, fixed him with blood-crazed, red-glowing eyes. "Got you, alien!" Angron shouted. He seized an ankle, spun, and hurled the Raffen into the air. The alien, used to the sky, thought itself fortunate, until Angron's weight smashed into it. A shoulder blade shattered. Angron had leapt and now stood with a heavy boot on its shoulder and wing. The God of War's roar came down, tearing flesh. The serrated teeth of the axe drank deep alien blood. "Ah!" The Raffen leader fell like a kite with a broken string. Angron, clutching half a torn wing, sneered. "You're pretty durable, aren't you?" "You damned alien," he roared. Rage thudded from him, raw and hot. "Do you think you can stand lofty and superior? Do you think you're master of humanity?" The wounded Raffen strove up from the dirt, breathing hard. "Human, I admit I underestimated you. You think you're liberating them? These slaves name me their master. If I die, they'll only hate you." Angron spat. "You were never a liberator," the Raff snarled. His fanaticism made Angron's frown deepen. He could not tolerate such sanctimony. Angron stepped closer, the mass of his armor and axe like a living mountain. "I told you, I won't let you die so quickly." The Raff curled a sneer on his bat-like face. "Do you think you've won? You have lost, human. You will be my slave. I have endless time to torment you in the immaterium." No sooner had he finished than space itself began to fracture. The Raffen was a creature of both warp and reality. He reached out with claws and flung gray psychic coils to bind Angron. They tried to drag the demigod into the immaterium. Then a loud slap cracked through the tearing air. The Raffen leader's eyes went slack with disbelief. Why could Angron still move? Before he could react, Angron slapped him again, the force of a demigod swelling half the alien's face and sending sharp teeth flying. Angron brought his great boot down onto the Raffin's chest. Dust punched into the air. Angron stared coldly. Pain emotions swelled around them, and the immaterium lost its purchase on the physical. The Raffin's voice trembled. "What kind of monster are you?" Angron sneered. "You alien, are you tougher than a sheet of paper?" System AI had already been working. Angron Unit 2, he almost dragged you into the warp, it scolded. "Are you an idiot, stepping right into the trap like that?" The System AI's complaining tone made Angron's face go hard. "Cough, cough. Well done, butcher's nails." "Wrong, wrong," it snapped. At those words, the system lashed out, sending a jolt through the Raffen leader. There was a sick, crisp snap as ribs fractured beneath alien skin. The Raffen leader had not expected his victor to be a lunatic. He gurgled, clutching at shattered ribs, blood frosting the ground. Jel, a tall scion at Angron's side, held a mortal record keeper and watched with detached glee. He was already picturing murals and annals, Angron with his great axe, trampling an alien beneath a wall of dark emotion. This was glory for the 12th Legion and their Gene Father. "Have you found the Sisters of Silence?" Khorne asked, leaning forward. "No word from the Imperial Navy. Their signal ends at this system." "Their ship might be gone," Jel said, frowning. There was no trace, no mention anywhere of that vessel. The Sisters of Silence were even less accounted for. "Alien, did you take a ship?" Angron demanded. "Do you think I would tell you, foolish human?" The Raffen leader snarled, half a wing shredded, blood pouring from his maw. Angron did not hesitate. His great axe fell, and the Raffen leader's head left his shoulders. Conrad Kurze watched, expression unreadable, as their Primarch took his first share of the slaughter. The Night Haunter stepped forward, lightning claws flashing, and ripped the alien's head loose with brutal precision. Then, to the discomfort of those present, he ate it. "My brother, your taste is a bit peculiar," Angron said, unsure at first. "I am extracting his memories," he added. "You can do the same." Kurz cared little for Angron's recoil, but he did care that there was no mention of the Imperial Navy in the alien's thoughts. That absence was wrong. He turned the fragments in his mind and asked, "Nail, is there a faster way than this?" Angron muttered to his intrusive implant, unwilling to descend to Kurz's brand of savagery. Yes, take me from your head and put me in his." "I'll take a bite," Kurza said blandly. System AI clicked, puzzled. "Are you being serious?" Conrad's face shifted as slivers of the Raffen leader's memories streamed into him. They were not orderly records, but shards, images, sounds, sickness. He doubled over as visions poured in. Smoke, a pallid shroud, dying screams. For a heartbeat, he covered his face, then collapsed to his haunches, drained and pale. "Brother!" Angron braced himself and knelt. He could feel his brother's agony like a contagion, and without thinking, began to draw it away with the practiced solace of the butcher's nails. He let Conrad's terror and despair flow into him and attempted to steady it. "Pale shroud," Conrad whispered through trembling lips. Angron's implant, nail, went blank for a beat at the name. "Do you know what that is?" Angron asked. "I don't," Angron admitted. Nail supplied what it knew. The Pale Shroud was a catastrophe from the 34th millennium that had wiped out 11 chapters of Space Marines. Only the Nova chapter had survived. It should not be a thing to appear here. Why would the Emperor send an entire detachment of Sisters of Silence? The AI's processes spun for a moment, stitching together a possible thread. Perhaps they had been dispatched to deal with something here. Conrad's hands gripped Angron's arm. "I see smoke and death," he said. He forced himself up. "It is a warning, Angron. We are mired in a war with things we do not understand." Angron thought for a long moment. "We are already in the vortex of war," he said at last. "If we win once, we win again, until forever." His gaze hardened like a blade. "Come, let us purge this enslaved world." Zerial was a feudal backwater. Night lords, nobles, and exhausted peasants eking out a living on poor soil. The palace gates opened, and the victors walked out into the streets. Angron felt the psychic sheen hanging over the populace, numbness, pain, a quiet, gnawing despair, and it was directed at him and the 12th Legion. "They are dead," he said softly, closing his eyes. His fists clenched so hard his muscles twitched, and veins stood out along his arms and throat. Conrad, newly steadied, could only watch the display of storming grief and offer no comfort. "Kill them," Nail answered in his head, blunt and impatient. Angron looked upon the people of Zerial. The alien corruption had twisted them beyond repair. Even those who still looked human carried ruined minds and broken souls. The world had become a larder for the Raffen. There was nothing left to save. A local dignitary screamed, "Get out of our world!" and a scion named Khorne rose, bolter raised in fury. Gel's hand pressed the weapon down. He shook his head minutely. He waited for the Gene Father's command. Angron's voice, heavy with sorrow, answered instead. "I thought this was liberation," Khorne said, eyes shutting as he steadied himself. "This is a disaster," Angron said. He watched his legion respond as he drew himself up. His scion's day muscles quivered with the thrill of the carnage. Cleanse this world, find the pure seeds. There was no hesitation in command. The warhounds were weapons, and they obeyed. They were the legion, tools called forth by Lord Angron, bringers of death to his enemies. This the scions intoned as they marched. A kneeling man begged, clutching at a scion's knees. "Please, spare me." Khorne did not look. The chainsword in his hands screamed and sprayed gore as it bit Beth, tearing through corrupted flesh. Around them, the city burned, flames clawing into the night, heat and smoke redrawing the skyline. The Redemption Guard ringed Angron, while human fools hurled themselves at their doom. The Legion gave them what they sought. Limbs and bodies littered the streets. Those who had been turned by the Hraffen grabbed at anything, sticks, shovels, rusted tools to fight. It made no difference. The Night Lords worked the shadows. Mortal scribes recorded everything with pale faces. Angron watched a scion seize a man and tear him in half, fastening the severed head to his belt as a trophy. The sight twisted something within Angron. He stirred, rage and grief warred beneath his skin. He lifted his axe to charge, to strike down another line of corrupted humans himself. A pair of massive hands closed on his shoulders. One of his warriors had stepped in front of him, palms pressed to the Primarch's cuirass. The warrior felt the quick, erratic thud of Angron's gene seed through the flesh of his grip. He looked up and saw Angron's face. Not the frenzy of battle, but a sorrow older than any war. Angron's command lingered in the air as the flames ate Zerial and the warhounds continued their purge. Find the pure seeds. Cleanse what cannot be saved. The planet screamed beneath their boots, and the 12th Legion obeyed. "My scion!" Angron reached out, seized the skull from the warrior's belt, and flung it to the ground. This is not honor. It wasn't. There were no opposing armies here. Apart from the Xenos, only corrupted humans remained. Against a siege hammer, thin paper shreds, the shattered remnants could not resist the warhounds. The warrior stood frozen, regret stirring in his chest. "I'm sorry." "No need to apologize, my scion. Do not let slaughter blind you. Reckless killing will drag you into depravity. I do not wish the 12th Legion to be mere executioners. We must know our enemies." Angron spread his hand and pointed at the scattered limbs and severed bodies that littered the ground like torn paper. They were once human. Grant them mercy. "Warhounds, we are the hounds of humanity. We are the enemies of the Xenos. Let us finish them. Then, drive out those hateful Xenos and unleash the fury of humanity," someone roared. Gel hefted his battle axe and glared at the warrior who had been rebuked. Angron felt the warhound's assault continuing, but with restraint, no longer the pointless torment of those already corrupted. Since the Age of Night, these people had been subtly poisoned by the Xenos. Now death was their only release. A mortal scribe silently recorded the atrocities committed by the 12th Legion. When the last corrupted human on the world fell, Angron looked over the ruins, fists clenched. His gaze dropped to the children left alive, no older than 10. Conrad Kurtz's scions moved to advance, but Angron halted them. Someone ordered, "Root them out." The voice was cold. "They are not our enemies," another voice, low, unyielding, said. Angron studied the survivors. He knew they could still be saved. The nails in his head chimed, their metallic voice echoing in his thoughts. "You want to keep them?" For these survivors, the warhounds were the reason all their parents were dead. Their hatred ran deep. Angron hesitated, then answered, "Yes." He knew his impulse was naive. Silence stretched as he looked over the few hundred remaining souls on Zerial. He steeled himself for a struggle with the nails. He had prepared to argue. Instead, the implant replied flatly, "Fine." Angron blinked. He had expected refusal, a reprimand, or outrage. "Why?" he asked aloud. "This world is unimportant. Why would I want to kill them?" These mortals need only a few generations to fold into the Imperium, but they require supervision. How about sending them to Nuceria? Angron suggested. Why send everything back to your home? Nuceria is poor, extremely poor. The Nail's voice was terse and for once impatient. It was clear it preferred to finish these operations quickly and return to Nuceria to begin farming. After all, who knew which of the Primarchs would spark the great heresy years hence? Horus? Guilliman? Sanguinius? My lord, another distress signal from a vessel, Gel reported. Angron and the Nail both turned to the star map, the implant unfurled within his mind. The Nails muttered about ghost ships and the Emperor's motives, then accelerated the calculations. 7 trajectories flickered across the map. The destination was 7 days away. 7. The Nail's tone sharpened. If nothing supernatural was happening, Angron thought the implant would gladly wrench his head off. Angron felt the Nail's mischief and bristled. We have trouble. He heard seriousness in the metallic voice, though it remained an electronic sound. What trouble? Just asking. Angron Unit 2. Do you dare eat shit? The blunt question flushed Angron scarlet. Gel took a step back, smirking. You eat one and let me see. You eat shit. Don't even think about it, Nails. Don't you dare. Gel's laugh felt like a shockwave, and for a moment, the momentary levity split the tension. Then a memory pressed through, hot water splashing across his skin, and Angron remembered the scar along his spine, a crimson cord winding counterclockwise from base to sternum. It twisted over his ribs and belly, the cord of triumph, marks of victories earned on Nuceria, each red line a triumph, no black marks to mar them. The title Unconquered had been both honor and humiliation when he was a slave. Can you wash a bit cleaner? The Nail complained. Hey, Nails, I'm bathing. Angron protested, but he scrubbed the spot anyway and hung a towel over his shoulder. The fleet dove into the warp. They would chase the distress signal. What they would meet, Angron did not know, but he had the Nails. Listen, there's business to handle. You need to write to Unimus. Also, Nuceria's recruits are ready. Once matters in the Ghoul Stars conclude, the Legion can expand. The Adeptus Mechanicus has built new vessels for the 12th. And Yochuka has joined the Warhounds. The Tribune left on Nuceria praised that young man. When Angron heard that Yochuka had joined the Warhounds, a faint smile cracked his grim face. His kin were not disappointing him. These are yesterday's Legion duties. Gel has organized them. A servitor with green, flashing eyes opened a door, and a long line of servitors stood in the corridor, each holding stacks of documents. Nails, you haven't finished processing them? Angron touched the butcher's nails on his skull. They felt slightly loose. He could not tell if it was his imagination. I've processed most, but you need to review these. You are Angron, Legion Master of the 12th. I am merely a butcher's nails. Angron took no offense. They were linked at the core. These are Conrad Kurtz's combat statistics. His speed surpasses yours. His combat data is odd. Angron found a chair and sat. He did not understand why the Nails were studying his brother's records. Speed? Exactly, look. Conrad Kurtz's combat footage played inside Angron's mind, presented from the viewpoint of Angron's scions. Kurz stepped from shadow, tilting his head with a cruel smile. A lightning claw flashed. A Hraffen warrior split in half in an instant. Do you see? See what? Angron asked. He predicts his opponent's next move. Your brother perceives the enemy's action as it occurs. He finds the single opening to kill. The Nails showed another sequence, Xeno gunfire snapping chains of light to block routes, and Kurze slipping through to plunge his weapon into a winged foe. Angron closed his eyes. The image was unnervingly clear. A warrior's intuition? He offered. No, he sees it. If it were you, your armor would bear the scratches, not him. Angron did not speak the thought that rose unbidden, but I still have you, out loud. He watched again. No flourish, only brutal efficiency and lethal precision. A troublesome opponent. Only blood for blood will check Conrad Kurz. Hopefully it won't come to that. Angron nodded. He hoped never to face this brother, but Kurz's ability suggested others in the galaxy might possess similar gifts. Also, your Marines are imitating you. Angron cocked his head. The Nails explained, most Space Marines are wounded during close-quarters duels. As their gene father, they mirror Angron's mindset. This was interstellar warfare, not Nuceria. These warhounds were meeting this kind of Xeno for the first time. Their recklessness in close quarters was causing needless losses. "What should I do?" Angron asked. "Talk to them nicely?" Gel teased. "Or tell them to pick up their little wooden sticks and go pew-pew?" Another mocked. Angron considered. "I suggest you don't do that. They'll think you're distancing yourself." The nails sounded mildly weary but practical. "How about I teach you?" Section 33 system data flashed across the triage screens as Gel walked the corridor toward the Triumph Hall. The Redemption Guard and the captains of the companies had gathered at the summons of their Primarch. None of them knew why Angron had called them, but a command from a Gene Father was an order, and they obeyed. Angron stood at the head of the hall, his great frame hunched, face drawn in a deep frown. The sons watched their ancestor with unease. Even the hardened warriors could see that something gnawed at him. For a long breath there was silence, then Angron's voice, low, raw, cut the air. "I am very disappointed in you." The assembled legionaries stiffened, as if struck. Expressions fell, and every soldier there felt the old, cold spike of guilt prick them. They searched their memories for the offense that would draw such condemnation. Khorne glanced between the two men at his side. "What's wrong with him?" He muttered to Gel and Varys. Varys's mouth twitched. "Perhaps his condition has worsened." Angron's chest rose and fell. The words had not meant to become a reprimand. Something in him had seized the voice. He clutched his back with both hands, a dry, strangled sound escaping him. For a moment he looked almost absurdly human, off balance, pained. Then his expression snapped. He laughed, harsh and hoarse. "Wrong, wrong, stop shocking me," he roared, as if shooing away an unseen nuisance. The hall's tension did not break. Instead, it curdled into alarm. Angron's hands trembled. "So, what is going on now?" Khorne demanded aloud. Before anyone could answer, Angron's eyes glazed and the world slipped away. He was somewhere else. Moss-covered monuments, shattered shards of jade set in a broken clearing. Pitch-black trees wavered around a path of crushed stone. Ahead, a garden grew thick with emerald moss. The place was alive with a bewildering, false cheer. Tiny, giggling sprites darted among the roots, their laughter like the tinkling of glass. A sickly sweet scent filled the air. The creatures tried, over and over, to approach him. Angron did not smile. His body would not allow it. Decades under the butcher's nails had left him with a deep animal loathing of such softness. He did not trust it. He waited, every muscle taut, because long habit had taught him that witches and tricksters waited in places like this. "Nails," he whispered, fingertips worrying the ridged metal at his temple. For a second, relief flushed him. If the nails were present, that meant the world was real. But the thought turned cold. If the nails weren't there, it could be a trap. He stayed still. The sprites drew closer. Then came the gentle susurration of running water, and white steam rolled toward him. Laughter exploded into screaming as a huge bath drew into view, steam fragrant with rot. A fat man sat in the bath, a jovial, enormous figure whose tears, tiny as beans, rippled across the water. He looked at Angron with a grin that was all indulgence. "Why are you weeping?" Angron's voice startled the creature. The bathman searched for an exit. "Stranger, first time we meet," the creature gurgled. "We will be allies in the future, comrades of flesh and pus, just as you did on Nuceria." Angron's vision lurched. He knew that voice. Nurgle's filth slithered from the edges of the dream. The garden rotted, the sprites curling into pustules and nodding with sickly smiles. Angron's hands clenched into fists. He smelled bile and decay. The butcher's nails roared inside him. Not a human voice now, but a vast, angry mechanism. It surged, furious and obscene. The figure in the bath flickered, and for a heartbeat, crawled into a truer form. Square-headed, a compact mass of blemishes and cracked, weeping skin. A great hollow opened in its chest, and inside small, writhing things nested like maggots. A pus-dripping thing reached for his leg and began to lick his trousers. Angron reacted on instinct. He kicked. The creature burst beneath his heel, spraying foul ichor that splattered his face. He gagged. Bile burned his throat. "Shut up!" The nails bellowed, a guttural, profane sound that dominated the dream. In his mind it clothed itself as a green-robed figure and came to his side, stroking his crown with unnatural mechanical hands. The robed thing's presence drove a wedge against the corruption. Angron could feel black and red emotions, rage, contempt, fury, pour out like a tide as the nails forced the entity back. "You are a good boy, Angron. Trust me, you will join the great Father Nurgle alongside your brothers. Get out of my unit, demon! The nails snarled. Its voice had never sounded so furious. It hurled curses and contempt, brute force that shredded the illusion. The bath and its owner began to flicker and dissolve. As the corruption fled, it left a final, spiteful trick. The entire steaming tub lurched beneath Angron's feet. He lost his balance and plunged. Ugh! He woke on his bed with a wet, choking gasp, retching until his throat hurt. For a long moment he lay there, trembling and hollow-eyed, the stench of the dream clinging to him like a living thing. Varys! Gel's voice cut from the doorway. The door banged open, and the librarians stormed in, led by Chief Librarian Varys. Tension flared like a drawn blade. Gel and Khorne confronted Varys with angry shouts. "This is betrayal," Gel accused. "Explain yourself." Varys did not shrink. He came directly to Angron's side without answering Gel. "My lord," he said calmly, "we detected a malevolent presence trying to influence you." Angron sat up, hands clamping his face. Sweat slicked his temples. "Varys, you cannot just enter someone's mind as you please," he rasped. "Yes, my lord." Varys inclined his head once, deferential and steady. Angron swung his legs off the bed and pushed to his feet. "I need a bath. Clean everything. Now, bring me a bucket." Gel and Khorne barked orders. Warriors scattered to fetch water, soap, any cleansing that could be found. The Primarch stalked to the great bathing chamber, where his scions poured steaming water over him in a flurry of anxious, clumsy ministrations. He hid his face in the scalding water and spat mouthwash into a bucket until the scion holding it nearly fainted. Even as they worked, their hands were cautious, as if afraid to touch whatever had crawled from his dream. When the frantic washing slowed, Angron dried himself and faced Varys. The librarian's robes still smelled faintly of the warp-damp air. His eyes were tired but clear. "How much do you know about the warp?" Angron asked, voice low. The company shifted. Khorne opened his mouth to speak, then thought better of it under Angron's withering look. Varys inhaled. He knew that any answer might be judged as treachery or as mercy. "The warp is not a physical place," Varys said carefully. "It is the Sea of Souls, a realm of spirit and thought. It is where emotion and belief take form. It is also home to things that feed on us." At the word things, Gel strode forward, crimson in the face. "Silence," he snapped. "Do not speak blasphemy before the Gene Father. These are dangerous ideas, heretical." "It does not matter," Angron interrupted. He moved with a slow, grinding deliberateness to his seat and remained there, not rising to Gel's rebuke. "I said you would speak, librarian." Angron studied Varys. "Once I spoke with a master of the Thousand Suns," he said slowly. "Their librarians are odd. They are obsessed with the warp, but the warp is no mere void of lost souls. There are things in it that walk, and they are not natural." "They are evil," Varys answered. It was the barest acknowledgement. Angron felt it was almost nothing. "I dreamed last night, my children. I saw those abominations." Angron's voice thinned. "Maybe it was only a dream, but it left me uneasy. In the warp, I can feel things that are wrong." "I know, Varys. The Legion has its judgments about your kind, but to me, whatever they call you, you little sorcerers are still my scions." Angron's tone was slow, heavy. Varys sensed something in him was off. "Darkness is gathering," he went on. "Darkness that will cover all mankind. I do not know what to call those things, demons, chaos, whatever they are." Angron lowered his eyes. "But no matter what they are, if they dare show themselves before us, I will lop off their heads and offer them to you." Khine stepped forward, eyes fierce and unyielding. "No matter who the foe is, Xenos or human." His voice carried the absolute, simple faith of a warrior. "As long as they are your enemies, Father," the captain continued, "the warhounds will strike them down in your name and present their heads to you." Gel watched Khane and then the other centurions. They all wore the same expression, unquestioning dedication. Gel felt the words catch in his throat. Khane was not speaking for himself alone. He had spoken what most of them felt. The warhound's devotion to Angron had reached a dangerous intensity. Gel dared not think what would happen if their Gene Father called them to face that colossal threat they'd glimpsed. "And if I die?" he heard himself ask. Angron's mouth split into a grin that did not reach his eyes. He ran his fingers over the butcher's nails at his temples with a touch that was almost tender. "When did our first fight take place?" "Nuceria." A dozen voices answered. Nuceria, Lord. We fought and we bled there. Gladiatorial blood is not enough to make us immortal. The Emperor took me from the pit and put me at his side, Angron said, voice raw. We fought together. You call me father, though I am not older than you. Why? You are a warrior, Khorne said. A warrior dares to stand against wrong, to challenge evil. But do not worship me blindly, Angron said sharply. Follow me, learn from me. There is only one Angron and one Khorne. I will answer your questions, and I expect you to question me. Yet I hear only blind obedience. He shook his head. He had lectured them before about the nails and the cost of unquestioned loyalty. Their adulation sometimes seemed to want to absorb him whole. Some things he was glad to give them, others were poison. Varys, Angron commanded, my chief librarian, I need you. The warriors in the chamber held their breath as if the word itself might break. Varys inclined his head. Speak. How do you fight evil? Angron asked simply. At that, Varys's eyes brightened. The librarians had always been set to their rights. This was a call they could answer. As you wish, he said, and then, correcting himself, no, not as you wish, as we will need it. Angron rose from his bath and let the scars and grafts of 100 battles be seen. These are the ropes of triumph, the marks of a warrior, he said. But I do not want such things on your bodies. Freedom is a long struggle. The warhounds are not just my domain. I need help. I need those who can solve problems I cannot fix with a blade. The scions stared at his scars, as if that was all they had expected to hear. For most of them, the word helpers drowned under the worship. Only a few registered the rest of his meaning. A dry, sardonic voice, the ship's AI, made a sound like amusement. The comment slipped through the ranks and was ignored. That night, the nails woke him. The shock pulled Angron from shallow sleep. He wrapped himself in a new robe, a rough but finely stitched cloak made by the sons of Angron. At its hem was the jagged mark of the Night Lords, a gift from darker brothers. Khorne and Gel escorted him to the bridge. The Redeemer was a hive of activity. Mortals scurried, reporting to Captain Lothara Salen as the vessel prepared to move. When Angron stepped onto the bridge, she fell into an automatic salute. In her eyes, there was the small, weary worship of one who believes fortune follows such as him. Ever since Angron had come aboard, the ship had obeyed more easily, the tech priest's complaints had slackened, and Lothara took it as a blessing. Where is the ship? Angron asked. We picked up a distress signal, Lord Angron, she said, from a vessel named the Holy Emperor's Roar. It's on the edge of a dead world. That world should be dead, Angron said. She hesitated at the phrasing. The star map spread. Angron felt something go cold in his gut. The world on the display was verdant, green oceans, continents alive with color. Several marked human colonial outposts dotted its surface. Lothara pointed to the cog of the Adeptus Mechanicus stamped on the chart. Angron only nodded. During the Dark Age of technology and the Age of Strife, the Omnissiah's explorers and their cults had seeded worlds far from Terra. Seeing the cog did not surprise him. What did surprise him was that the Royal Archives and Mechanicus records listed this system as a barren, yellowed world, a dead, lifeless rock. Nails, Angron swore under his breath. Lothara's eyes widened. Then she saw it, a data filament, one of the machine tendrils the nails sometimes invoked, extending from Angron's head toward the console. It flicked once, like an animate thing, and plugged into the ship's systems. Lothara pretended she had not noticed. A Night Lord's channel opened. Conrad Kurz's pale face filled a display. Brother, Kurz said, voice flat, I do not advise you to go to that ship. Will I die? Angron asked. I saw only disaster. Kurz's hands were like ice. That is enough, Angron said, and turned his face from the screen. Nails. Give me counsel. The ship's AI had already begun its own scans. I am detecting something, it reported. The tone was clinical and urgent. Readouts crawled across the holoscreen. Dense biomatter. Unnatural life forms crowded on the derelict, densely packed, writhing, and exuding a presence the AI's emotional filter described as repulsive. Sisters of Silence are on it, the AI added. At the word, Angron no longer hesitated. Khorne and Gel fell to either side of him, the old confidence returning to their faces. They shepherded him to the arming chamber while tech priests sealed power armor around his frame. He hefted his wargear, the roar of engines and the clank of servo and iron, a familiar prayer. and glanced back at the boarding party. "Anything to shoot?" he asked the nearest tech priest. Outside, a Thunderhawk was preparing for launch. Jedek, once a standard bearer of the 8th Company, now assigned to the ammunition assault team, worked with grim efficiency, loading ordnance with more speed than the mortals around him. He had been moved back from the front lines, a quiet demotion that had kept him alive. He did not expect notice. Angron paused on the stair and looked down at him. "Good work, Jedek," he said simply. The compliment stunned the man into a brief silence. Then, clumsy with pride and relief, Jedek shouted, "For Angron!" Gel and Kane exchanged a quick look that said more than words. As Angron started up toward the Thunderhawk, he offered tendril-fingered invitation, the kind a warrior gives to one he chooses to save. "Want to come along, warrior?" Jedek's face brightened, disbelief and hope warring in his features. The two captains already began to whisper about where to put him afterward, logistics, or maybe the kitchens. But for the moment, Jedek's answer was enough. "My honor, Lord Angron," he cried, and the thunder of boots and the rush of the ship's systems rose up to meet them as the Redeemer leapt toward a world that should not be alive. Jedek straightened his armor, strapped a power axe to his waist, and fell into step behind the others. At the Thunderhawk's ramp, Gel and Khorne were blocking the entrance. "No room, Jedek," Khorne said, arms folded. Jedek's face flushed with embarrassment. "Come sit here, Jedek." Angron's voice cut across the cramped bay. Gel and Khorne exchanged a look. Better to ship him off to Mars and make him a tech marine, one of them thought. The other grimly agreed. The system AI relayed the thought straight to Angron, whose face also flushed. He glared at Gel and Khorne sitting smugly in their seats. "Look," someone teased, "Father's watching me." "Yes, he's watching me!" Angron wanted to throw the two of them out, but the Thunderhawk lifted off. Several other craft from the Night Lords rose as well. Fate's wings began to stir. The system AI calculated a path. 7 Thunderhawks were heading for the Emperor's holy ship. When they landed, a green mist lay over the deck. The place was empty except for the steady drip of some unknown liquid. "Angron, maybe we should leave," Conrad Kurze said as he disembarked. He watched the deck and felt disaster like a shadow closing in. The air itself seemed laced with plague. "What will we encounter, Conrad?" Angron asked. "I don't know," Kurze replied through his mask, pale under the hood. "Then we'll find out." Angron hefted his bolter, its weight and shape different from a normal space marine's, and walked forward. "If this is a plot, we break it. If it's a trap, we break out. True fear is the unknown. I won't stop until I see my enemy." Kurz had no quarrel with the barbarian's blunt certainty and followed. The drip sounded louder now, echoing along the ship. The crew lay twisted across the deck, bloated and riddled with spores that crept even across the steel. A sticky, useless squelch clung to Angron's boots. He felt a corrosive mixture of pain, rage, and sorrow rising from the corpses. "Fire! Corpses!" The system AI announced like an imperative. Angron didn't hesitate. He raised his bolter and loosed a hail of rounds. "Redemption Guard," he barked. Gel and the others opened up in unison. Those on the deck, creatures now, their bodies convulsing, hadn't expected anyone who would abandon all rules. Angron roared for flame. A warhound with a flamethrower surged forward and turned the swollen bodies into steaming heaps. "Turn left. Find a data port," the system AI ordered. Angron ignored the ruined men and followed the directive. The flames purified the blasphemies that clung to the deck. When he glanced at Varys, the veteran shook his head faintly. There was no trace of warp or psychic taint in the corpses, only a biological corruption. A dense green fog pushed along the corridor ahead, and a thin, gaunt line of figures loomed in its depths. "Fire!" Gel shouted, and the warhounds flanked Angron. The putrid corpses advanced. Bolter rounds fell like meteors, tearing the infected bodies apart and holding the monsters at bay. Sons of Angron with flamethrowers stood forward, searing the fallen to ash. The scent of roasted flesh filled the narrow spaces. Angron strode on with a war god's fury in his wake. "What are you doing?" One of the Redemption Guard muttered when Angron paused, idly feeling the haft of his axe. "I'm just getting a feel for it," Angron grunted. The guard charged anyway. Under his grudging order to advance, they cut the tide of reanimated crew until Angron reached a control panel. Data tendrils slipped from Angron's head, green, wiry threads of machine interface and plunged into the console. The corridor flared into light as the ship's systems responded. Log found, the system AI announced. As the AI parsed the data, it discovered survivors, odd, unexpected traces that made it hesitate. The ship had arrived here 7 days ago, the same time they departed, but the mission manifest was absent, likely a verbal directive. Reading Group 856084. This ship is alive. The system AI's voice filled Angron's neural feed. Angron watched the ship's trajectory in the data as the craft pitched toward the planet. Alarm rushed up his spine. The system AI wrestled with a voice in the ship's machine spirit, a corruption clawing for control. Why, wisdom, Father Nurgle, join, the corrupted spirit warbled. I Father Nurgle your, the machine spat, garbled and obscene. Angron blinked at the crude curse. The corrupted voice seemed to be trying to insult him, and the butcher's nails in his skull twitched with discomfiture. Don't start if I didn't start, the voice rasped. Okay, Angron muttered, oddly satisfied. The ship dove faster. Curze saw, to his own disbelief, something like a smile on Angron's face and wondered if he was hallucinating. He wasn't. Angron really was smiling. The corrupted machine spirit began to shove junk into the system AI, filth and viral code. Virus, alert, the AI warned. Antivirus dispatched. Antivirus dispatched, it repeated, erecting shields and countermeasures. The corruptive data, thick with rot, struck the system and was held back. Visual noise blossomed across the ship. The machine spirit manifested as tiny, distorted Angron-shaped avatars, static-streaked, digital caricatures of the warlord that scrambled across displays. Roar! They screamed in simulated bellows. Angron, hearing his voice echoed back electronically, let out a faint, embarrassed roar that reddened his face under the helmet. The little digital avatars kept shouting. Then, in a laughably crude distortion, the corrupted spirits spat another blasphemous line. Father Nurgle, your mother! Angron Unit 1, beat him for me! Roar, the little figures chanted back. It was ridiculous. Angron's jaw tightened. Brother, listen to me, he barked. Varys stepped forward to deflect the attention from Angron. Sorry, everyone. My father's schizophrenia is contagious, and apparently machines catch it too, he said dryly. Conrad Kurds watched Angron with dark interest. This was the 12th Legion's secret, the butcher's nails manifesting in absurd small ways. Kurz calculated the timing. News from Nuceria would be arriving soon. The butcher's nails were a fascinating, dangerous thing. When the ship stabilized its systems, the system AI directed, Angron, to the bridge. The AI's tone carried something like resentment. Even it shuddered at the abomination. Corruption, chaos, a savage logic masquerading as a virus. The green taint was more than biology. It had infected the data. If not for the pervasive psychic overlay of the butcher's nails and Angron's own presence, the system AI might have detected the corruption earlier. Rampaging Angron-shaped data tore through the green torrent and smashed the infected code apart, angry in its own way. This was Nurgle's work, not aimed at Angron or Kurz alone, but at the butcher's nails themselves. The seed of corruption had been planted to germinate later. The abominable intelligence had timed its work for maximum ruin. Fate had been upset. Now it fought back. The AI shouted, "Antivirus, quarantine," and images of tiny Angrons were consumed by scrubbing protocols. Angron feared the nails in his skull and considered ripping his data tendrils free, but behind him the dark corridor flickered with flame. The putrid corpses of the crew were gathering there, massing like a tide, ready to surge. The Night Lords hacked at the apparently unkillable putrid corpses in the dark, forced to patiently saw and chop the things into pieces. A foul, viscous fluid pooled underfoot. System AI seized control of several shipboard systems, and automatic machine gun turrets descended from the upper decks. Loyal gunfire opened up on the hordes. At the very front stood Khorne and Gel. Gel swung his power axe continuously. Larger than the other warhounds, he could hold a line almost by himself, with Khorne and Varys at his side. The warhound's librarian was drained pale. The repeated use of psychic power had left him barely conscious. Frost crept across the gangways, the cold slowing the spread of the stench and the corrosive fluid. "Put on your helmets," Varys barked. "Beware the plague." A presence of malice finally made itself known. Fel Zarost, the Night Lord's chief librarian, had been hiding in the darkness, as was his habit. but seeing the condition of Varys and the Warhound's librarian forced him to move out from the shadows. Sevatar cursed the restless abominations as he closed on the battle line formed by his cousin. A warhound at the very front retched up a mouthful of blood. He dropped to one knee, staring in disbelief at his hand. Ceramite there had already corroded, gray-yellow rust crawling up his gauntlet like a living thing. The blood pooling at his feet seemed to feed something in the deck. Spores burst, strange growths flowered and fruited in a blink. The warhound swore and gripped his bolter as countless pale hands clawed at him and empty, gray-white eyes fixed on him. "Join us," voices hissed into his head. "Join the Mercy! 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 Your mother!" A violent psychic impact slammed into his mind. He grinned oddly and raised his bolter as if to fire. Then he went under. Someone cried. "Iron warriors!" another shouted. "Rescue our cousin!" Sevatar had reached the front of a detachment of iron warriors. He stared coldly at the fallen warhound. Power armor hummed under him. An iron warrior reached in and hauled the veteran back. Garland Surlac, the warhound's chief apothecary, shoved between them and examined the man with a hard, professional eye. "Poor bastard," he muttered. He snapped a diagnostic and came to a grim conclusion. This veteran would have to be burned. He was infected. "Can't be saved?" a voice asked over the vox. "If you intend for all of us to become infected, I can try," Garland replied. "All right," System AI answered in clipped text. At that moment, Angron's eyes opened. Data tendrils that had been feeding into him retracted instantly. He seized his axe, the weapon the warhounds called God's Roar, and the ship, which had been tumbling, began to level out and push toward the planet's atmosphere. Any small mercy. "Child," Angron said as he moved to kneel among the wounded warhounds. His voice was soft, and for once almost tender. "Father, kill me, I beg you." He looked down at the veterans around him, at the injuries and the corrupting rust. Apothecary Garland Surlac had already drawn a hypodermic, preparing to remove the gene seed. "Wait a moment," the System AI transmitted. "Can he be saved?" A flicker of hope softened Angron's tone. "He cannot be saved in the old way, but I can let him live on differently. Of course, this is only an experiment." "How do I do it?" Angron demanded. "Tell him it will hurt. Tell him to hold on." The System AI's diagnostic text blinked in his mind. Under every eye, the strangest thing happened. Multicolored nanoscale tendrils of data streamed out from Angron's back and formed a pair of immense, shimmering wings. The filaments pulsed and refracted light into a dazzling, impossible halo. "Is that sanguineous?" someone breathed. Conrad Kurze leaned forward, eyes fixed. It was a vision he had never seen, an angelic descent, and yet these wings were not like Sanguinius's. They were more intricate, more terrible. The wings unfurled into countless filaments and wrapped themselves around the head of the half-dead warhound. "Dionysus!" someone shouted. The wounded man screamed. Angron felt new things fold into his mind, sensations and data that had not been there before. He almost whispered, "The nail?" "A small trick," System AI replied. "New module generated. Soul datafication loaded. Dionysus recorded. Recording complete." One had to admit that the star god's gifts were unnervingly useful. "Angron," Conrad Kurze reached out as if to touch the wings. Barbs along one filament flicked and slashed his hand, claws tearing through armor. Conrad flinched as a sharp, irritated voice echoed in his head. "Get lost, little bat!" Conrad's face froze. He had been rebuked by something only Angron could command. "You'll keep my secret, brother?" Angron asked with a sober look. Of course," Conrad managed, still shaken. He nodded stiffly. The Night Lords and Warhounds had formed a tighter bond. The Warhounds held the center while the Night Lords protected the flanks. System AI scanned and recalculated. Despite the thronging putrid corpses on the decks, the counts looked wrong. The ship had never seemed designed to hold so many. Fog and smoke shed as the skirmish line steadied. Angron's gaze snagged on a behemoth coalescing in the deeper shadow. His jaw tightened, a migraine blooming behind his eyes. "Lower deck, near the engine room. That's where we'll find the person we're looking for," System AI reported. Much of the ship's systems had been restored, but corruption ate at the hull and superstructure. Even the Emperor might have chosen to burn such a vessel rather than salvage it. Sudden violence tore at the line. An Iron Warrior's thigh exploded as if struck by a pneumatic hammer. He collapsed in a tangle of shredded ceramite. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then System AI registered what Angron had seen through his enhanced vision, a swollen, blasphemous mass stitched from the bodies of countless Imperial soldiers. The monstrosity shrieked, and a ragged cavity in its chest spat something greasy and solid into the air. Angron, uncharacteristically grave, stepped behind Conrad Kurze. "Shield!" he roared. His voice could have split metal. The reek reached even into Angron's helmet before the seals closed. It made him gag and burn with a cold, ugly rage. The small points of light along the decks were swallowed by brighter muzzle flashes. Force fields flared and sputtered. Whatever those creatures projected from their cavities reduced ceramite to a joke. Green, solid slugs slammed into shields, then dissolved into caustic liquid that ate at armor. Gel planted a massive shield and held it fast. Shield bearers braced. Clanging metal sounded as the corrosive liquid sizzled and ate away at buckles and plates. "Hold the line," Gel bellowed. "Advance! Advance! For Angron, advance!" The warhounds took up the cry and began to push. Larger silhouettes resolved out of the dark. Gel, a veteran of countless fights, saw an opportunity. The blasphemies feared fire. Warhounds with flame projectors stepped forward and unleashed torrents of fire. The green, feculent projectiles were incinerated in flight. The creatures themselves were seared and screamed. "The nail!" some man cried in pain and fury. Angron watched the damage around him and felt a rage flare red and hot. He no longer cared for the teachings of restraint. The wings at his back folded up and vanished. Gripping God's roar, he strode into the torrent and lifted his axe high. The blade fell in a single, terrible arc. "Get lost!" Nausea roaring through him, Angron split the thing open with an axe. Flesh tore apart and corrosive fluids dripped over him. As the blood and ichor fell, a red shield rose slowly around the wound. The nails, they are in pain, Angron thought, felt their agony slamming into him. He also felt their yearning for release. He reached out his hand. This might be a trap. System AI warned. Angron pressed his hand to the slowly knitting, blasphemous formation anyway. "Idiot," System AI spat contemptuously. Endless pain flooded Angron's mind. He used his power to help them find release, and then a voice, utterly unlike his own, sounded inside him. "Child." A presence embraced him, vast and comforting. The gentle whisper tempted him again and again. Join them. I told you, this might be a trap, you idiot." System AI's warning snapped through his head like an electric prod. The electrical jolt yanked Angron awake. He convulsed under the stimulation and looked up to see the blasphemous thing before him, annihilated by his own power. In that flicker of vision, a thin figure stood between him and the wreckage, small, green, unreal. "The nails!" Angron shouted. It was the last coherent sound he made before collapsing. The Redemption Guard surged forward in panic, ignoring the Xenos that clustered around them. A swift, ghost-like figure caught Angron before he hit the deck. Conrad Kurze did not know what had happened to Angron, but he saw terror and his eyes leaked tears. "Brother Angron, my brother!" Kurze begged, cradling the fallen Primarch as Angron had once cradled him. The System AI's voice snarled elsewhere in Angron's head. "This is my chassis! This is mine! You damned CS! Join me. The garden will cheer for you, and the world will shine brighter because of your arrival. You foolish thing. I am the great unspeakable one. Do you know who you speak to? I am the Chaosian god. I am the destroyer of all gods. I am the apocalypse. Your apocalypse. Now kneel and wait for death." Your brain does seem to have some issues. However, Angron's eyes snapped open in Kurze's arms and a torrent of psychic power erupted from him. Dazzling light forced Chief Varys and Chief Zaros to clamp their eyes shut, yet even so their souls felt scorched. "Go fuck yourself. I'm not the Emperor. Get lost, you pile of shit." System AI bellowed, dumping all the emotional energy it had absorbed from Angron in a single catastrophic release. The shockwave rolled through the ship. Conrad Kurze glimpsed the small green phantom standing before him and Angron roaring its hatred into the immaterium. "Father?" Kurze whispered, bewildered. Angron thrashed free of Kurze's arms, rolling his eyes and bellowing at the air in a furious, inhuman roar. "My lord," Gel watched, breathless, as the god of war charged into the ranks of putrid corpses. He hauled himself to his feet. Khorne glanced at Varys and the others nearby. "Take care of them," Gel shouted. "We're fine. Khorne, go after him." Varys croaked. Psychic energy surged through the corridors. The putrid corpses outnumbered them, but under the system AI's control, Angron pushed his body beyond mortal limits. He moved so fast, even Conrad Kurze could not track him. Gel, Khorne, Sevatar, and Shen followed in his wake. In brutal, close-quarters combat, the Berserk Primarch fed on the suffering of the trapped souls, converting emotion into raw power. The dying creatures turned to gray-white dust beneath his blows. A god seemed to have descended onto the deck. Every time Angron neared a section of the ship, the automatic turrets pivoted up to join him. Even corrupted servitors flickered. Green light bloomed in their optic lenses as if they, too, chose their allegiance. Loyalty in that moment required no words. "Drop your shields," Gel roared. The Terra veterans trailing them ripped their shields to the deck and stamped past. The Gene Father had opened a rout. Those who had borne the initial brunt of the assault were exhausted, but the sight of their Primarch unleashed drove them on. Chop, smash, kill! The system AI, furious and relentless, employed its own brutal remedies to dismantle every corrupted construction, mechanical and organic alike. Anything that could move, rise, fire, or fight was dragged into the slaughter. Oh, right. System AI remembered the corrupted machine spirit hiding in a corner of the ship's systems, suppressed by the butcher's nails. "Fry, you bastard!" It snarled, and a flood of red data washed across the trapped machine spirit. The small, pitiful thing had tried to resist before. System AI did not care. It dismantled the contraption piece by piece, a grudge made manifest. He butchered his way from the upper decks to the lower, smashing hatchways and opening new corridors of slaughter. Putrid corpses lifted their vacant gray eyes toward the source of the light. Roar! Does death know fear? The imprisoned souls did. System AI felt their shudder, and he opened door after door as though opening numbered blind boxes. Fear spread like a contagion. Conrad Kurze thought, with a cold clarity, that the Night Lords should study Angron to learn what true terror looked like. Silent roars crawled through the ship. Angron's bellow saturated the ship-wide comms. Sound assaulted Kurze until he thought he must be deaf. Echoes hammered inside his head. Hallucinations shimmered at the edges of his vision. Each time a phantom swelled, the next roar yanked him back toward reality. Nausea and vertigo made him clutch the steel deck and dry heave. "Brother, my brother." Around the engine room, a handful of survivors made a ragged final stand. When the ship's broadcasts began to play those monstrous roars, the crew suspected a new blasphemy had arisen. "Sister, perhaps we should abandon ship," a Navy sergeant said, turning toward the Sisters of Silence huddled in the corridor. "The plague's spreading. We're out of food and medicine. We've only got enough ammo for one more wave. There are escape pods on the deck." The Sister of Silence replied in sign language, "My sisters are on the planet below, carrying out the Emperor's will. This ship cannot be abandoned." "As you can see, we're dying a slow death here," the sergeant insisted. "Roar!" A piercing animal roar rose in the corridor. The Sister of Silence did not answer. Calmly, she buckled on her helmet, drew the sword from her waist, and the sergeant, stomach-turning, followed. "Screech! Sir! Something's at the door!" a crewman shouted. Bang! 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 The steel door began to warp and deform as fistfuls of pressure slammed against it. They did not know what pressed outside, but they had ammo, and they were ready to use it. The door creaked and hissed as a pair of enormous hands tore it open. White eyes glowed in the gap. Fear made one of the defenders lose control. He fired a laser into the breach, and the beam struck the edge of the torn door. System AI recoiled. Were these survivors mad? The gunfire continued, staccato and terrified. System AI squatted to the side of the doorway like a lonely sentry and waited. After a long, tense moment, Conrad Kurze approached, clutching his pounding head. Night Lords and Warhounds panted at his back. "What happened, my brother?" he asked, staring at Angron, who crouched nearby like a coiled predator. The thunder of gunfire came from inside the room. System AI, still guiding Angron, pointed a finger at the twisted steel with an expression that wore grievance like armor. Gel had reached his limit. "We are the Warhounds, the 12th Legion of the Imperium. We have come to rescue you," he bellowed, and his boot smashed into the door. "Whoever shot at the great Primarch, come out now." His roar silenced the room. Terror made every throat go dry. A man inside stammered, "Are you rescue?" "Whoever shot at His Highness Angron, get out here," Gel thundered, eyes full of a furious pained affection. He looked at the crouched Primarch and felt a breaking grief. What had been inflicted on their father was unforgivable. The door hung too mangled to open fully. A pair of huge hands finally pried the gap wide, and a mortal, white and shaking, fired at the booted figures and immediately wet himself in terror. Jel and Khorne were silent for a long, awful second. "Kill him," a dozen hearts whispered. On the left stood Gel, erstwhile chapter master of the Warhounds. On the right stood Khorne, captain of the 8th Company. System AI, still in control of Angron's body, had seized the trembling shooter. One of Angron's restless scions, the twitching, hooked scalp of the Primarch, writhed in each of his hands. The mortal sat on the deck, sodden with fright. A hawk-eyed stare fixed on him. It promised the treatment reserved for enemies of the Imperium. Conrad Kurze watched the scene unfold. In the dim light, he thought he saw faint electric arcs skittering across the air. Whether illusion or not, the stench of death, the damp, the spores clinging in the cold corners of the engine room pressed close, and the ship itself seemed to hold its breath. Section 38, Angron woke with a gasp, certain, terrified that mushrooms were growing out of his skin. He slapped at his body, and for a long moment could not be sure whether the nightmare had ended. Cold sweat ran down his face as he took in the familiar surroundings, his room, his bed. He dared not relax. His hand flew to the butcher's nails lodged in his skull. The metal implants were still there. "Nail," he called faintly, but initially there was no answer. An illusion, another damned trick of his own mind. Panic turned physical. Angron rolled from the bed and snatched at the nearest object for a weapon. An antique long lamp, its age worn into the brass, came away in his hands. The noise brought the door crashing open. For a moment, the 4 figures in the doorway, 1 Primarch and 3 of his sons, stood frozen, unsure of what had happened. "Your Highness Angron," Jel blurted. "Don't come any closer," Angron snapped, brandishing the lamp with the absurdity of it made plain in his grip. Silence fell. The 3 warhounds, Gel, Khorne, and Varys, stood a little apart, faces drawn by the fury in their father's gaze. Gel moved to put himself between Khorne and Varys, hands raised in supplication. Varys' eyes were rimmed red, as if stunned by shame. Angron's voice, low and venomous, cut the room. "Turn off your damned illusion." The butcher's nails finally answered, a mechanical, binary whisper that struck like a blade. The nails spoke to him as they always did, black, insistent commands. "Angron Unit 1, kill them. Kill these impostors of my scions." Another voice hissed from the implants, accusing and raw. "Can you stop making such ridiculous scenes whenever I'm trying to rest?" Angron's toes dug into the carpet. His face burned. His hands shook. More than anyone else in the room, Varys looked as though he might break into tears. Still, as a son of Angron, he swallowed his humiliation and tried to explain. "Your Highness is having a mental episode," Varys said, voice trembling. Jel and Khorne exchanged doubtful looks. Angron tried to steady himself. "Sorry, I was confused from sleep. How long have I been asleep?" This time the nails answered clearly. "1 day, my lord," the implant's voice said. The relief that washed over Angron was visible. He stepped toward Varys and clapped a hand on the chief librarian's shoulder. The gesture, silent and rough, offered some comfort. "1 day," Angron repeated. "Have we found the Sisters of Silence?" Angron asked. "Only 1 was found aboard," Jel replied. 7 others are on the planet below. Gel relayed what the sisters had told them. Apart from the 1 aboard, all survivors were sent to the planet. They were infected with a plague. Apothecary Galen has no remedy. "What happened to the ship?" Angron demanded. Gel's anger creaked at the edges of his words. "The sisters' squad was on a mission from the Emperor, but the details are secret, even from us. When the 7 descended, contact was lost. Cultists infiltrated the ship. We suppressed the rebellion and killed them, but their deaths were only the beginning. This plague," he made a helpless motion, "it turns people into walking corpses." Angron closed his eyes, the nail delivering data to him even as they spoke. "What about the survivor squad that was put down?" he asked. "Lost contact," Gel said. Angron's jaw tightened. "What are the Night Lords doing?" Gel hesitated, then gave a short, unsatisfied answer. "Not my remit," he muttered, glancing to Varys as if to pass the burden. Varys only looked back, equally disinclined. The mood in the chamber was raw and brittle. "All right," Angron said at last. "Let me see the sister." They had prepared for every contingency. The sister sat in a reinforced cell, the warhound's precautions plain. A red button glowed, a fail-safe that could jettison the cell into space if necessary. The speaker grill crackled. The voice that came through was distorted, strained. "This is our first meeting. I am Angron, Legion Master of the 12th. Tell me your mission," Angron said, watching the sister's hands as she cleaned her weapon through the one-way glass. "I cannot," she replied. "This is a mission bestowed by the Emperor. I cannot elaborate." Angron's temper flared. "For your sake, my scions have suffered heavy casualties. As a son of the Emperor, what are you hiding from me?" "I do not want my scions to die for no clear reason," she said. Rage tightened her features. "I apologize. There is no need," Angron said. Then he stunned everyone with the order that followed. "Destroy that planet." "No," Jell exclaimed. "You cannot, Your Highness. My sisters are still down there." "Tell me your mission," Angron snapped. "Otherwise, I will send you down there as well. Without our help, your sisters stand no chance. Either tell me what the Emperor has tasked you with, or watch everything you care for die." The sister's expression did not shift. The refusal in her eyes was absolute. For a long moment, Angron considered his options, then surprised even himself. "Very well," she said at last. "Throw me down." She wanted to go to them. That simple, impossible choice, an act of faith or of martyrdom, caught Angron off guard. He scratched his head, uneasy. The nail's approach, its cold logic, had not produced the result he'd expected. "Everyone, out," he ordered his scions. "Tell her this. Chaos is coming. If she does not cooperate, none of us will survive. Threaten her. Tell her I will report treachery to the Emperor himself." "You can't," she began. "See whose father I am," Angron growled. The insult and the declaration rolled into one. Even Angron felt like an animal for a moment, a rough, cowardly thing making threats. But the sister's face did not falter. She was stubborn to the bone. After he dismissed them, Angron argued with the nails. "We don't have to go down," he said aloud to the implant lodged in his skull. "The planet reeks of rot. If it's Nurgle's doing, we will meet those things soon enough," the nail countered. "Haven't you ever wanted to see whether demons truly walk this realm? This is the chance." Angron bristled. "I believe in battle, not in nonsense," he snapped. He did not want to go, but he hated admitting fear of contagion. The nail's voice took on a taunting edge. "The brave warrior retreats. How disappointing." Veins stood out on Angron's forehead. He forced himself to his feet and pounded his chest with a fist. "I, Angron, am fearless. I only find it disgusting." On the other side of the glass, the Sister of Silence sat back in her chair, the knowledge that she had been deceived folding over her like a cloak. Jell and Khorne hovered, chattering in the way of men who did not know how to comfort. "Do the sisters have doctors who can treat this?" Khorne asked. She answered with emphatic hand gestures. "No. Mental corruption, this sort of brokenness, had no cure the sisters could offer." Far from that cell, in ways no human mind could map, the immaterium boiled and hummed. In a garden of ruin and rot, a great, ancient presence stirred a green, bubbling cauldron with a withered wooden spoon. Father Nurgle watched, resentful and aching. He had led Angron here. He had worked to pry open the Primarch's mind and to coax him toward the garden's embrace. He had imagined Angron ruined and rejoicing, crashed with his fleet, infected, joyfully accepting the love of Father Nurgle, becoming part of a grand design. Instead, there was resistance. The nails, those iron-edged instruments, had cursed him in a way he had not expected. The binary, brutal commands echoed in his thoughts and made a mockery of the fate he'd planned. For the first time in a very long time, the benign, indulgent Lord of Decay felt anger. "One day," he muttered, the words like a promise and a threat both, "I will put you in the pot and boil you for 10,000 years." He stirred the soup and watched the future twist under his hands. The laws of the material universe grew pale beside his will. Time folded, events formed and unformed. Fate was not yet decided, and Nurgle would not be denied his due. Weapons fire rained from orbit, turning the planet's surface to glass. The 13th Expedition Fleet unleashed its fury despite not knowing what they would find. Angron's hollow eyes watched the burning land below. A Sister of Silence signed the mission, destroy an alien device. When Angron understood, he sighed and let the blue and white helmet be fitted to his head. Fresh, filtered air filled his lungs. He drew himself up and addressed his warriors. We only have the target location. This is a race, he said. Drop in, find the other sisters, destroy the plague, releasing instrument, then return to the ship, or simply destroy the instrument and return. For Angron, his scions roared. The ship's AI turned that roar down to the lowest volume on the comms. The Night Lords will support us from space, the AI announced. This time, it's just us, Angron replied, feeling the familiar warmth in the folds of his skull, the butcher's nails answering him. As the drop pods plunged through the atmosphere, the warhounds were ready. Explosions and shockwaves tore the jungle apart, dust and heat sweeping across the drop zones. Pods slammed into the earth and disgorged squads of space marines. Raiders spun away, thunderhawks peeled for orbit. Angron's boots hit soft, wet ground. Attack, he commanded. He watched the distant jungle and felt a prickle of unease. Orbital weapons had already cleared a path. Great jets of fire and shrapnel had carved a lane through the trees. A Sister of Silence watched, signing a question to Gel. He read it. Artillery coordination? Gel shrugged and signaled back, and more barrages slammed down until the forest lay as an open avenue of glass. 2 more rounds, someone barked through the implant-driven rumble in their heads. The ship's AI, puzzled but obedient, switched targeting feeds and brought down another volley. Only when the forest was an empty skeleton did Angron move forward, satisfied. His superior vision found bodies twisted in vines, human and otherwise. He almost ordered exterminatus. Can I? Gel asked. Act fast, Angron said curtly, and they pushed on. They reached the lip of a rift valley. The objective lay below. A cold wind cut over Angron's power armor. Across the gorge, he felt eyes on him, not an illusion. A thunderous report echoed, and a humanoid shape tumbled from the far vines. Enemy attack! Gel roared, craning his head toward the cliff. Countless camouflaged humanoids swarmed the face of the gorge, pale-faced and green-backed, climbing the vines with inhuman speed. Warhounds, protect Prince Angron, someone cried. Gel leveled his quad-barreled bolter at the advancing creatures and opened fire. Bolter rounds tore through bodies. The cliffside erupted in the staccato of impact. Angron felt a familiar malice in the air and looked down into the massed shapes with disgust. This was a war the Sister of Silence had never seen. Nothing the Iron Warriors had done compared. Here, orbital weapons fell within arm's reach. Waves of heat and shrapnel licked faces. Death was immediate and intimate. Yet fanaticism burned on the warhounds' faces, a love of battle and an appetite for honor. At the valley's base, alien creatures were charred and riddled with holes. Bodies rained down, piling in a grotesque cascade. Dreadnought veterans strode from drop pods to take positions. The librarians flung psychic flame at the blasphemous life forms. Angron was the first to land solidly, Gel and Khorne at his heels. Gel seized a fallen alien and flung it aside with a disgusted laugh. Even without the close-quarters carnage he craved, the slaughter pleased him. Then the mist came. Redeemer Guard closed around Angron. Dreadnoughts formed the outer circle. Fog, not the ordinary churn of dust but a cold, whispering pall, rose and swallowed the rift in a few breaths. Prince Angron, communications interrupted, Gel reported. An alien device was jamming them, a frequent treachery here. Static crawled over the comms. Switch to channel 13, Angron ordered. The channel was rough, intermittent, but usable. Fog could hide them. Fog could not outfight the warhound's resolve. Now we are the hunters, Angron murmured, leaning forward. His visor painted the world in green and red blips, friend and foe. I have marked all friend and enemy targets. If there's time, I'll patch systems into our lads. His hand landed on Gel's shoulder. Bring me victory. Gel shivered and charged with the others. The avian servitor honed in on the targets. Where the fog promised sanctuary, red tracers showed the truth. The warhounds advanced in trust, trusting the man at their head more than sight. Their banner snapped through the mist. Where they stood, the aliens died. A heavy, sorrowful sigh went through the fog, a sound that crawled along the bones and made ceramite feel thin. It lingered, a mournful thing that no armor could quite filter. The librarians wove shields to keep their warriors' minds from corrupting whispers. Angron barked, "Move, warhounds, move!" and the meat grinder began again. Angron hefted a bolter. It felt small and awkward in his hands, but each shot still punched through multiple bodies. The fog thinned at last, revealing a ruined alien temple. a weathered edifice of broken marble and eroded visages, statues twisted into unfinished mockeries, all of them turned toward the approach like a congregation of leering idols. Angron stepped over fragments of bone and ceramite, the detritus of human and alien alike, and snarled, "Die!" The temple seemed to beckon. Statues watched with expectancy. A handful of Terra veterans carried a Sister of Silence forward. She lay whole and unmarked, breath gone, but no wound to explain it. For a moment, Angron thought she slept. He looked to the one surviving Sister of Silence nearby. She was expressionless, and she signed a prayer to her fallen kin. "She died inexplicably," Angron said aloud, voice low and furious. "This is an insult to a warrior. As fellow humans, I will avenge her." The surviving sister returned the gesture of thanks. Angron did not reply in words. He dropped the bolter and gripped the god of war's roar at his hip, a heavy, familiar weight that steadied him. He felt the nails throb in his skull and muttered, darkly, "Don't blame me for not warning you if you get covered in shit later." He shivered all the same, and then turned, blade and fury ready, to lead the warhounds into whatever waited within the temple's shadow. He tossed the bolter to Khorne, then took it back as if remembering at the last second. "I'll give it to you when we're done," Angron said softly. "Of course, you could always give me a bigger one," Khorne replied. Khorne's excitement dimmed for a heartbeat, then flared again as he elbowed Gel. "I heard that, brother." A smile tugged at the corner of Gel's mouth, but he quelled it quickly. "Khorne, stay alert." Khorne realized he'd let himself get carried away. He tightened his grip on the weapon as Angron's cloak swept past and the warhounds moved into the darkness. "He has come." "Yes, they have come." Whispers braided through the gloom, praising Angron's arrival and promising things that made the hairs on the back of a man's neck stand up. This time they said they had not come simply to bring him home. Nurgle's mercy toward him inflamed envy, but he was still the family they loved. "Let us plant a seed in your heart until it blossoms." The warhounds were quiet, their silence hotter than dread. The Sisters of Silence watched the advance without sound. They thought of the death guard, grim, inevitable, but the warhound's stillness held a different fire, like a volcano waiting to erupt. Melta weapons came up. The unit's servo skulls scanned the ruinous tunnel ahead, 100 little eyes feeding data back to System AI. The high-dimensional mind shattered the psychic blockade. It had already mapped the mountains, buildings, and the strange things that flickered in the space beyond. Voices threaded themselves into Khorne's skull. "Plus, you are jealous of your brother. You have done better than he has. You should be the one to receive your father's attention." At first, Khorne thought it an illusion. Then the words sank cold. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" Gel murmured, puzzled. "Something's in my head," Khorne said. He didn't know if his mind was starting to fray like the Gene Father's, or if a sorcerer was working him. "An evil thing has marked you, Khorne. Focus and resist." Varys's voice crackled in the comms. He made it clear, the librarians did not possess the Gene Father's gifts. Khorne spat back a torrent of curses that would have made a veteran blush. "Go look at your own damn mother, you filthy whisper," he shouted into the dark. The obscenities silenced the intruding voice for a long time. Perhaps it had never expected someone to broadcast its taunts so utterly. Khorne's face showed nothing, proud and excitable as ever on the surface, but inside he had utterly damned the thing trying to worm into him. "Khorne!" Angron called, checking the signs at his side. Khorne shook his head the slightest degree. If System AI had not flagged strange fluctuations coming from him, Angron might never have noticed. "Ready!" Angron ordered. Gel clicked once. "Fire!" Angron roared. The mountain answered. Dust and rock exploded outward as the warhounds carved a new tunnel straight through the stone rather than following the narrower, trap-laced path the Xenos had prepared. System AI refused to play at fate. Brutal, efficient, and quick, that was the tactic. The Xenos who had hidden in the dark never expected the prophecy of their triumph to be undone so simply. Dreadnought veterans brought their multi-barreled turrets to bear. Flames and hot lead lanced into the ambushers. Screams were choked to nothing. The enemy were shredded, crushed, ripped open. "Breach the wall! Attack! For Angron and the Emperor!" The Redemption Guard roared and charged, heedless of the avalanche of fire meant to bury them. The Gene Father's command sat with them like a blessing. The Sisters of Silence followed, each breath of theirs like a swallowed storm of dust. The Warhound's tactics were a new kind of madness. Dancing on a blade was no longer the right image. This was walking a rope over a volcano. Smash the walls. Charge. Leave no time for the Xenos plagues to spread. System AI curated every heat signature and radio blip. Even beings cloaked to thermal sensors were painted bright on the Warhound's visors. Binary feeds updated in an unending stream. Where the sons of Angron could not see, System AI showed them true forms. Cooperating, they butchered the enemy with guns and cannons until what had promised to be a triumphal ritual was instead a rout. On the other side of the veil, faith bled away. The scions tasked by Nurgle keened and howled as their plans were undone. If things continued like this, there would be no seed to plant, only scorched earth. Angron snorted, the breath rasping behind his faceplate. The war cry in his grip swung like a reaper's scythe. When System AI pointed him at a sight, the Legion struck it again and again. They were inexorable. Malice rose in the air, accompanied by a thin, unhappy sigh. This is not what I wanted to see. Angron watched pale, emaciated Xenos freeze and then be chewed apart by the Warhounds. Then a new sound threaded through the clamor, a sickly, constant buzzing. A putrid aura uncoiled, green fluids leaked from shredded skin, brownish sores festered and swelled. The Xenos' shapes sloughed away, and something else crawled up from the soil. These were chaos daemons whose forms had been birthed from the reversal of the Xenos, plague-bearers, the lowest soldiers of Nurgle. The sight proved that some great and terrible entities were beginning to panic. The sacrificial altar had not even been completed. System AI had shattered the enemy's plan. They had been forced to change tactics, hastily, even at cost. Take a shortcut. Rocks fell on top of the newly spawned demons, explosions sealing off passages as furious wails rose from behind the rubble. The creatures could hardly believe their attackers dared to cut them off. When the final corridor opened, it revealed a cavernous Xenos temple choked with hideous statues. White-skinned Xenos roared as the Warhounds advanced. The Warhounds' trump cards were at the front, Melta teams and flamethrower squads made up of Terra veterans. Angron himself came to the tip of the assault but did not move to the very end of the broken bridge. He looked instead at the blasphemous altar in the distance. Immaterium energy leaked from it like a visible sickness. Varys and the librarians swam to Angron's side and cloaked him in a psychic shield. High above, the corpses of Sisters of Silence were strung up like trophies, their bodies desecrated with robes and oozing sores. The sight made Angron's jaw tighten. Among the desecration, he saw 3 Sisters of Silence still clinging to life, if what they endured could still be called living, trapped within a monstrous apparatus that pulsed with a sinister green light. Angron surveyed them and said softly, "Your mission has failed, sister." She said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on her entombed comrades who screamed and spat pus, their forms unrecognizable. She could not understand how even the untouchables had been reduced to that. "Leave the rest to us," Angron said, steady and low. System AI calculated instantly. An alert flashed on Angron's helmet. Distance, too great. A red line marked the strike coordinates. Plus, "You cannot do this to us." The evil whispers pressed into Angron's mind. The ritual was one step from completion. Once it finished, they could come through the veil into the material universe, and then there would be a reckoning to discuss with Angron. "Nail it," Angron barked, the command crisp as a blade. High overhead, Redemption Captain Lothara Salen's hands trembled as she confirmed the bombing coordinates relayed from the ground. The same coordinates, bombed 3 times, and Legion Master Angron still stood below in the blast zone. She felt the weight of a dozen deaths in her chest. Press the button, and there would be no turning back. "Who the Emperor protects," she muttered, closing her eyes. She pressed the button. High-energy reaction detected. Aerial strike inbound. The first blast shook the earth, throwing dust and light into the temple and rattling the stone. The second strike hammered into the psychic shield, trading sparks with Varys' wards. The third fell clean and shuddering, the shield shattered. The blasphemous apparatus disintegrated in a white conflagration of light. A fierce wind rolled through the chamber as dust and sound tumbled outward.